April 10th, 7 o'clock. Minutes of 3:13.
Motion to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed.
Are you in favor of the minutes there, Mr. Larger?
I read them and they're perfect. Yeah. Count me in.
So what was that, Mr. Chairman?
500.
Thank you.
Any filings
No filings.
in the Form A plans?
No Form A plans.
No Form A plans. Planning board recommendation, 489 Central Turnpike layout alteration.
Okay, what is this plan? You have a copy of this, I believe, in your files. The police station project is currently being planned on this lot, which used to be the Blue Jay lot. The county layout for Central Turnpike combines with the state layout from 1920 of Putnam Hill Road, which is part of the state M route, presents an extremely wide turning radius on these opposite corners. So the selectmen are proposing to alter the layout to take this area you see highlighted in red, which is also shown in hatched area on your plans, and take it out of the layout and attach it to that lot. So they can then have a little bit more area to work with as they do the police station design. So, because it's alteration of a public way layout, they're required to refer it to you for your recommendation. So you just need to vote on whether you recommend allowing the alteration to the layout or do not recommend. And then I will report that back to them for their next board meeting next Tuesday.
So if it goes forward, we have to get this, this is, involves the town and the state?
Nope, the county, when the county dissolved, the land under the county layout reverted to the town. Town council will of course do a title, just a title search just to make sure that it is as it appears. And then, so they're both our land, the land under the right-of-way and the land that the Blue Jay was located on are both our land. So all we need to do is to adopt the layout plan, the alteration of the layout plan, and the meets and bounds description of the alteration of the layout. So,
What is that, about an acre?
actually, I believe this one is, what does it say, 13,597 feet, so about roughly a third of an acre.
Want to chime in?
Well, first of all, as a planning board member, it's the first time we've seen anything about a police station as a board. That comes as a surprise to me. But just make that note, if you can. If I understand, the town is being given some land. That's what the hash.
That's part of the Central Turnpike layout that we own.
That we own.
So they're just transferring it from the public way layout and adjoining it to the lot that we also own. So taking it out of the roadway layout and making it an undivided part of the building lot.
It is for a police station that's
Right.
being planned.
Voted on
In
yet.
terms of order of operation, just
Yep.
let me step back a little bit.
Yep.
Because you guys usually see a project, usually a business project, residential, whatever, commercial project. Once all of the site layout and the architecture and the planning has been done. So what's going on right now with the building committee and the design committee with the police station is what normally goes on in engineering firms and with clients before they file for site plan review. The town administrator, board of selectmen, design committee all know they have to come through site plan review with the planning board, but they're in the stage right now where they're laying out the site, they're doing the architecture, they're doing all those things that happen behind the scenes with project proponents before they file with you. So that's why the planning board hasn't seen it yet, because in effect, the town and the design committee are the project proponents. They're just laying out the site and working on the architecture now. And like any other commercial and business project, once that's pinned down and they have those firm site plans, it'll come to you for site plan review like everything else does.
After town meeting is,
You have to talk to the the order of operations there. Obviously,
Yeah, I didn't know,
you
mean
want
to
to
open a
make
can of worms.
sure, you want to make sure funding's in place before you roll forward with, like, those last details of the plans and approval. So, I mean, it's up to the selectmen, the building committee, the town administrator, or the order of operations, but their preferred order of operations on this, on the Manchug Fire Station, on the wastewater treatment plant, was get most of the way through the design, just about ready to finish up and do all the complicated stormwater management docs and stuff that really cost a lot of money, and then make sure town meeting is ready to fund the project before you spend that last huge chunk of engineering money. So
Thank-
that's my understanding.
Thank you for making that clear,
Okay?
as I have to appear smarter than I am. And when people come to me and say, what's going on
Uh-huh.
with a police station, I say, a what? And people are on boards and saying, you haven't heard, and so it's just, I don't know in the future, but maybe we should get a heads up or something,
Well,
because I appear pretty dumb
There are-
saying, no way, I haven't heard anything.
They had
And
concepts, they had concept boards after the last annual meeting out in the
Right, for
back as you
design
left.
funding.
There was some,
Yeah.
concepts there, but that was really about it.
so hopefully everyone knows I'm not as dumb as I appear.
You are not dumb at all.
I didn't know anything. I heard from people, but I didn't hear from anything through the planning board.
And there are public meetings going on of that committee as we speak, open to the public and posted on the town's website.
And I just do some Monday nights every other week. That's
Right.
it. All right, thank you.
You bet.
And
So the curb line as shown is probably what everybody assumes is the property line by looking
Right,
at it
the
at this
reason I
point
gave you a
anyway.
the reason why I included the aerial instead of just a flat layout is so you can physically see what's out there on the ground. This grassed area right here is where the Blue Jay literally used to sit. The Blue Jay's front door was pretty much
Right.
there. So before, when you stepped out of the Blue Jay, you'd step into the state right of way. And, things happened in the past. So, but now we want to do it right and make sure that even though we own the right of way, we take that land out of the public right of way, because you're not supposed to build in the public right of way, and attach it to this lot, leaving an altered right of way, which you can see from the pavement radius that already exists, is more than wide enough for any vehicle accommodation. If you've sat at that intersection and watched, you can get any size vehicle through that intersection, no problem. So, okay?
No question? I'm going to echo Bob's concern about why we haven't heard of this a little earlier. It's my recollection that we had a conversation with an applicant shortly after the Blue Jay burn about what can be done to change that layout. And we said, nothing. Can't change it. It's the town's right of way. Can't do anything about it. That's the limits and bounds that you have to deal with. There's a couple of projects going on in town that I think the planning board should have gotten a heads up long before they got to where they are currently.
So who's on this, this committee for moving forward on this project? Is that an appointed position?
It's an appointed committee, I'm not sure, Rick Newmarker, are you on that committee? No? I know Dave LaValle was on that committee, he's recently resigned, I'm not sure who else is on the committee. It was appointed, I'm not even gonna say, because it would just be an assumption, who they were appointed by. The police chief, he's on the committee. I can tell you that.
Well, it does sound like a planning issue that might have been a slot available for a planning board member on that group.
I'm happy to pass those slots on.
Very good.
So
So
we need a
back to
motion
the-
Is that your
to
hand
recommend the
going
Yes, it
alteration
is.
or not?
Make a motion to recommend the alteration.
Got a second?
I'll second it.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
I do.
Go ahead.
So just about the radius, it seems to be common sense to do it, and I think it's probably if they tried to use those wide turns, the functionality of the intersection wouldn't work anyways, so, that's all.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstained?
That's a 4-0, or 4-1-0.
Oh, all right.
And Wayne, that's per your previous commentary?
Yes.
I do agree with what Wayne says too, but that's all right.
All righty. That one's done. Can I call that one? I don't want to approach you until you call the agenda.
Oh, endorse plans
This
for
is
the
rock and
rock
recycling.
yeah.
This is the half of the Myers lot where the large equipment sales are occurring. And you can see, as indicated, they have staged a piece of the equipment in the front yard, as
actually,
promised. It's ginormous, but we did allow that. So.
Yeah, okay.
So the plan is in accordance with the board's approval. It's run the appeal period with no appeals, so it just needs a motion to endorse and your signatures. And I need the most recent revision date.
Looks like 2/2/17. I will tell you, I stopped there today and met the gentleman. They seem really happy. I understand business is already pretty good there, so
Great.
Is that a motion?
I'll make a motion to endorse, yeah.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
One
We all-
one abstained.
One abstain. We all have to sign this?
In the butter.
Congratulations, I see that.
Miriam abstaining as in a butter?
Yeah.
Should we
So
do this
carried?
at the end of the meeting? Let's do this.
Yeah.
Do this at the
We'll
end.
sign all these at the end of the meeting, so we'll say
Okay, that's
that.
fine.
But it's for the most part, yeah.
All right, correspondence, other Forest Edge.
I just wanted to make you aware of the letter dated March 17th, talking about removing the land in Grafton was in chapter 61C, I believe it is, forestry in the town of Grafton. They're thinking about removing that from forestry. I have since gotten a conversation with John Bruce, the project component, as well as the Grafton town planner, Joe Layden, that frankly, the land should not be held in the ownership of Sutton LLC. That was supposed to be transferred out to the towns, the open space, a nonprofit, and if it was left, or a nonprofit, and if it was left in Sutton LLC's possession, there was supposed to be a permanent conservation or development restriction placed on both of those parcels in Grafton and Sutton. So, you may recall, he was looking for a potential cell tower development at that site. So I was in conversation with both parties today saying, look, you need to make sure you're in compliance with the permits before anything moves forward. So I'm working with them to make sure they're in compliance with the permits, they place the permanent restrictions, and then they see if there's any ability to move forward in any respect with the tower project, which looks kind of questionable right now. So I just wanted to keep you up to date on where that stands.
Okay.
Thank you, nice to be informed.
During the village center zoning meetings, some of you were present, I think Wally and Scott, we talked about ways to encourage preservation of historic structures, both public and private. And one of the articles, Financing History, that I found and gave to the VCOD committee, I thought would be very good for you to take a look at. And maybe we can have some future discussion on this potential option. To date, we only have mechanisms, or are aware of mechanisms to do historic preservation work on public property. This offers some potential for local options for voters to vote different tax incentives for preservation of all types of property, including private historic properties. So just an interesting piece of reading that is a really good planning piece. So just take a look at that, and I think we'll have more discussion on that. I did complete the landscaping bed with Charlotte Newton from the village trustees and John Burns. as directed by the board. So that's just the detail with the schedule of plantings. So I just wanted you to have that for your reference. And Charlotte's just going to let the trustees know about this as an informational. But I wanted to make sure you were okay with this. You can do a vote that says you're okay with it, or if you just want to do a straw poll, that's fine as well. But I just want to make sure you're okay with what we've done.
Thank you for getting something in writing.
Sure. Always best.
Anybody's brothers on, assume we're talking about this little oval.
Yep, just a little oval. It's about 30 feet long, about 12 to 15 feet wide. 2 full-size conifers, an upright, smaller conifer, and about 11 different grasses and good-sized shrubs on a raised planting, mulch planting bed.
In the dark lines are where the buildings actually are.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good job. I think, based on the previous meetings and all of our discussions, I would think all parties would be happy. And if they're not, they get back to us real fast, because this appears exactly what we thought should happen.
And the rep of the association was obviously,
Yep.
a party to the agreement, as well as obviously the developer.
Yeah,
So
yeah. And in the original,
select varieties that do well in any soil type and in sun or shade, try to be hardy and low maintenance.
we've heard from the people that wanted the screening. The people who wanted the screening have seen this. I assume
No,
who sends it to them?
they've asked for it once the board approves it.
Oh, okay. All right, then I make a motion that we approve it.
Second.
So this was for headlights, is that the problem?
Yeah.
I don't recall
Yeah, to break
this.
up, that's a whole window along that
Yeah.
side, the whole side of that house, so it's really to block headlights and
Yeah,
to break up the
privacy thing.
ceiling.
At what point does this kind of thing stop? If they don't like this, what happens next, you know?
Well,
They can plant
really
more if
your
they want.
motion is
They
it.
can, right?
Yeah.
Although, you know,
Whatever you approve, that's that.
that's that.
So I have a motion to approve by Bob, a second by Wayne.
All right, any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained.
At 5.
Yes,
Kinda like
please.
it.
Okay. I have 2 other items under correspondence, other. The first of those is a little drawing. It says Article 21, looks like this. We talked about the land exchange for Mill 2 in Nantucket. I just wanted to make sure you have the latest map. I will see the selectmen next Tuesday, at which point they'll decide whether or not they want to sponsor this, or whether you'll remain the sponsor. But I just wanted to make sure you were kept abreast of the latest drawings. It looks pretty much similar to the last one, it's just a little clearer. So. And the other issue is Donna Janes is here. Donna? She's buried back there. Come on up. You had previously granted Donna Janes an accessory apartment in 2009. She went to the registry of deeds, she'll give you a copy of everything, and recorded it. And was not aware, because there's not a notation on these ones, we now do the notations on these, that she thought once it was recorded, it basically was. That she wasn't aware that you really needed to pull the permit on that within 2 years. So she went down to the building department to get going on the permit, and they said, well, wait a minute. So, you need to decide whether you're gonna make her go back through the public hearing process. Nothing has changed about the accessory apartment that would affect this application. This is an accessory apartment within an existing structure. So it's not a detached, it's not even an addition, it's within the existing structure. So the building department said because nothing has changed about the regulations, they have no issue letting her go forward as long as the board is okay with that. So they've referred her back to you to decide what you want to do. And as you know, we now put notations on the bottom of our special permits that say, this permit expires within X years, if not,
Right, it
exercise.
doesn't, and it doesn't say it in the accessory apartment bylaw.
Yeah, I mean, all
It doesn't say
special,
that.
right, all special permits.
Permits are.
Right. So, she did do her due diligence, which we often see missed, and did record it. You know, we often have applicants come back to us and they haven't even recorded anything, but she actually did that step, so that's cool.
Do any opinions? I wanted this to be in this forum. I was asked this question, so I said this would be the place to make a
Yeah.
decision, so.
Thank you for coming back. First of all, when you first came in, we recognized that people put in accessory apartments and don't tell us. So at that hearing and here, thank you for doing it correctly. And it sounds like half the responsibility is on us because we should have been crystal clear. You're not a developer. You're just putting an accessory apartment in the house for. Yeah, and for a good reason. So I think we just have to be clear, because these aren't developers that are coming in here
Absolutely.
to build accessory, trying to do everything right. And that being said, I don't feel a need for any hearing, and feel partially responsible for not making it clear. But we should do that in the future, even for developers, but even more importantly for
anybody.
for taxpayers who come in and just trying to do
Right.
something in their house that makes perfect sense. Other than that, board
Yeah, I
members can
agree with
weigh in.
Bob.
Straw poll,
Good.
yeah. How about you?
I would agree.
I'm all set with it. She's done everything that she was asked to do. Now she wants to pull a permit.
Okay? I will report back to the building department. You may go.
So much, I
We'll do a better job next time.
If you could just pause before we start this hearing, I want to get some chairs for the people
I
who
was
are
gonna say
standing.
that, there's one more chair open now.
Got one more chair in the front.
Get some
Two
We
chairs.
got one more chair here. And let me get you some.
I stole one of them.
You want to, Wally, does it make sense to open a window?
Oh.
Standing room.
I'm curious as to whether
He's
it's
down in
yours.
here.
If it's gonna
Probably
go
the
here.
Sutton Center.
That's Nick to open the one back there. Hey, Nick. That's great.
That might be funny. Nick, hey, Nick, is it hot back there? You want to open a window? Is it warm back there?
She told me to go sit with her later.
Because of the board?
Yeah, she's gonna get some kind of presentation or something. So I can't see anything over here.
I can't either.
Standing room only at the planning board.
We've had big issues with the town end of the hall, just because we have anticipated.
Take care of that irritation.
Thanks, Wally.
And he's doing good, doesn't look as swollen as
No. They're saying I'm all set.
Say if you can't see, we're gonna put that camera this way, so people can see. But you guys have copies of everything, so.
Okay, so we're going to start a series of public hearings here. We have 6 of them. Some are sponsored by this board, some are sponsored by petition. So the way it works, we read that, we open it up for comments, you identify who you are and where you live, and we take down that information and make note, and we make determinations whether we should support this as a planning board and present it to town meeting and support it or not. The town meeting, that's what the moderator asked us, are, what was your determination, what was your vote? And so we will vote to support or not support that warrant article based on what we hear tonight.
whether they recommend an article or not, it still proceeds to the town meeting floor if it was petitioned by voters. And if the planning board does not recommend an article that is petitioned and it is voted down at town meeting, it cannot come back for a period of 2 years unless it is changed substantially. Okay. I'm going to try to help the discussion along, so this is participation here. So my magnificent assistant has made multiple copies of tonight's meeting materials. I have a copy of the full package of all 6 articles for anybody who is here for all 6 articles. I also have packages of each individual article if you're here for a particular article. So as we start discussion on each one, is there anybody here? I know you are, right there, Nick. Here for everything, here for the duration, Mr. Moore. Anybody else here for all 6 articles? Okay. Who's here for the registered marijuana? Oh, come on.
That's a good thing.
That's in your packet. It's okay, it's legal now.
Inhale, please.
Village Center overlay,
No, no way.
UCOD keeps in the back row. This is the gross vehicle weight petition article. This is the Wentz rezoning on Central Turnpike. Here, let's just pass, just poke around. It's just a copy of the article and the map, so feel free. Pass those. Okay, so that's the Wentz rezoning, and then the solar voltaic overlay. Solar? Solar? Who needs solar? You're just Wentz still? Solar, over here. All right, if at any point you want something and you didn't get a copy of it, just say, hey, over here, and we'll get it. Okay?
Bob wants to read the first one.
Okay, if you want to read the hearing notice and then decide whether you want to waive the detailed reading of the content.
Yes.
In accordance with the provisions of Chapter 40A5, the Sutton Planning Board will hold a public hearing at the Sutton Town Hall on Monday, April 10th, 2017. That's a correction. At 7:15 PM to discuss the following zoning bylaw and/or map changes. Number 1, to add to Section 6, capital P, registered marijuana, medical marijuana dispensary. And for the people that are here for that, I won't read the whole thing, but there's 4 pages.
Okay, we gotta go one at a time. All right, this is the planning board sponsored article regarding medical marijuana dispensaries. Medical marijuana dispensaries are entirely different than recreational marijuana establishments. Medical marijuana was allowed through a ballot question back in 2012. A lot of towns came on board and did their medical marijuana overlay district regulations very quickly. We decided to sit back and watch what everybody else did, watch the mistakes, watch the successes, and then do ours. Because nobody was rushing to knock down our doors to do this. So what we found was the town of Westboro and the town of Northbridge have really good medical marijuana bylaws. And Westboro actually ran the gauntlet with the Attorney General a few times and honed theirs into a really nice bylaw. So, why do we want to regulate medical marijuana? Medical marijuana. Gonna attack. Medical marijuana, you cannot prohibit medical marijuana. Via the state legislation in 2012, you absolutely cannot prohibit medical marijuana. What you can do is reasonably regulate medical marijuana, which means you can say where you allow it. If you do not say where it's allowed, it can go anywhere where a similar type use would be allowed. This is a zoning map for the town of Sutton. The red areas here from the Millbury Town Line to Central Turnpike, these dark areas, I see it in red because it's usually in color, sorry. The dark gray area is business district. These lighter shades are office light industrial. These striped areas here are in flat industrial. And the village districts are these polka dotted areas here in Manchog and in Wilkinsonville Village. Those 4 districts in particular would potentially be open to the location of dispensaries, cultivation facilities, testing facilities, and production facilities. If you don't regulate where, and another place, an overlay district, where you can do the use. So, in discussion with the board, what we did was we looked at the various areas where this use might be appropriate. Medical marijuana in general is not a drive-by use. If you need a dispensary, you have a prescription, you're looking online or talking to your doctor about the nearest location, and you're going to that location. It's not a use in general that needs a frontage location. As many people in town know, we have very limited tax-based development creation land in the town of Sutton. So the thought was, where we have visible frontage property, we'll reserve those areas for uses that need that visibility. So the thought was to place medical marijuana uses in other locations. So the board initially thought, well, let's put it in our office light industrial districts. These gray areas here and here, this is the old aggregate parcel, 122A and Buttonwood Ave, and behind there. This is almost 400 acres. And this area is South Sutton Commerce Park. This is Oakhurst Drive area. And this is currently fairly inaccessible area, Oakhurst Drive. And, sorry, this is Oakhurst. And this is an area that does not currently have access. We were going to do a west side connector road through that area to open that up. Originally, the board was like, let's do the whole OLI. That's 800, almost 800 acres. And that's not such a big deal when you're talking about medical marijuana. But as I'm going to fold in the next article a little bit, the recreational marijuana legislation is kind of written a little weird, and it suggests that wherever you allow medical marijuana, you automatically have to allow recreational marijuana. Not such a big deal if the regulations for recreational marijuana were very clearly written. There are no state regs yet clearly written, and thus no local regs clearly written. So basically the board said, look, let's pick a smaller area, ease into this, and then as the regs come out for recreational, if we want to add more area, we can do that. There's nothing to say you can't add area. So for the time being, they have limited the medical marijuana district to 120 acres about. I know it looks pretty little, but it's about 120 acres known as South Sutton Commerce Park. This area is further restricted a little bit because you can't place medical marijuana within 500 feet of a house of worship, and Lifesong Church is in the middle of this district here. It does leave the end parcel of almost 50 acres wide open. It does leave some of the front parcels, and actually the 2 second to last parcels that currently have businesses, one of which has lease area open. So there is area that can be developed for, again, medical marijuana, and the board has chosen, just for the time being, for this use to kind of take baby steps because there's a ripple effect with currently unregulated recreational marijuana establishments. So 2 different articles, but very much tied together. So, I think that's the summary. Are there questions on, again, medical marijuana? Oh, sorry. You're supposed to go through him.
Can you identify yourself?
Hi, Scott. Pat Morris, Johnson Road, here in Kennedy, and I'm also on the Finance and Warrant Advisory. And so we made a great presentation to our board last week. I'd like you to just tell me a little bit more about why other areas were not considered. And I'm going to use some of your words and ones you used tonight.
Yes.
If this is something of similar use, something that's allowed, it's a drive-by, it's very, very seldom used, and in fact, in the other things that you told us when you saw us the other night it was your belief that the majority of this is home delivered, okay? But we didn't go into the issues of where it is and input from the police department. This is probably one of the furthest places from the police department. It only has one access to get in there. Okay, so if it's similar use, why not put it over by Market 32? Because really, it's a drugstore. So I'm not opposed to it being in town, but I am questioning why we picked this one area.
Absolutely.
I'm also trying to fast forward to the next, and maybe you would also enlighten us again on what cultivation means.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me try to explain a little more clearly. All right. Typically, because we have such a small area in town for retail and business development, basically, if you look at the whole town, everything you see in plain white is rural residential. It's 92.3% of town, okay? So anything with this funny little striping here and here, that's suburban residential, so again, no businesses. These polka dotted areas are village districts. Those are traditional, like mill villages, where you can have a mix of small business and residential, including multifamily. And then you have your industrial districts, which are kind of your many different kinds of industrial here, sorry. Your heavier types of uses and kind of your broadest palette of industrial uses. And then there's the office light industrial, which has a huge palette of things, from small industry, some large industry, retail by special permit, and the like. What I was trying to express to you is this particular use does not depend on visibility to get its clients and to service its clients. So the thought was, why would we use very limited, highly visible property along Route 146 when this business doesn't need that? We want to reserve what little parcels we have along 146 for businesses like retailers, restaurants, or if the town so chooses, recreational marijuana stores that need the visibility, that use the visibility. So that's the primary reason why we didn't cite medical marijuana facilities directly visible to Route 146, because it's scarce land, it's very visible land, and it's frankly it's a waste of frontage visible property for use that doesn't need it. And the track record on the facilities that are up and operating is that this legislation, with the Department of Public Health as the legislating body, that piece of legislation extremely well written. Cultivation. Cultivation can only be done in a highly secure enclosed building. You can't be growing fields full of pot in your backyard. Can't do it. So, well, 5 plants or under, totally legal. So, but for your personal use and giving. But medical marijuana facilities, highly secure, enclosed facilities, little or no issues with those types of facilities for testing, for production, for cultivation. And frankly, the only issues we've noticed or have been talked about in the planning and the police community with dispensaries are the design of the site and the building themselves. Again, state law is really strict on these facilities. You have to have your prescription. Only you, not your friend who came for the ride with you, not your kid, if you couldn't leave them home, nobody but you with the card, your name on it, can step into a facility to be dispensed a prescription. A lot of the initial facilities didn't take this into account, so you have several locations that have dispensaries where you'll see people queued outside. It's a function of the law and the way the building is set up that only 1 or 2 can step into the 1 or 2 vestibules available for dispensing at a time. So it just wasn't, a lot of those initial dispensaries were reuse of existing buildings are not well thought out. So the only issues we've seen across the state with this kind of facility is the appearance of loitering, and granted there are a few facilities where there is actual loitering, but most of them it's the appearance of loitering because it just wasn't well designed. So we don't have any huge police issues with this kind of facility, and therefore there is no perceived issue, no issue in my discussion with the police chief about citing it in the industrial park. And like I said, by putting it in this area, it still gets the area it needs. It still has what it needs, and it doesn't take up valuable frontage visibility area that we need for other businesses that need the visibility. Questions?
Libby, 312 Boston Road.
Did it again, sorry.
Westboro, you said, is kind of a,
They have a really good medical marijuana bylaw.
what, do you have any statistics? How long have they been up and running? Do they, what problems have they encountered, if any?
Honestly, I can't tell you if they have it. There's 9 dispensaries operating around the state. There's only 2 in particular that I've heard of, talking to the planners I know, that have had any issues, and one of them was the appearance of loitering issue, and one was an actual loitering issue. But in that defense, it was a site, there was just the location of the site. It makes it kind of a loitering site, period. So it didn't matter if it was a dispensary or a McDonald's, there would be loitering there. So I don't believe actually that Westboro has an operating dispensary right now. So they did run they've had 3 versions of their MMOD bylaw, honing it and perfecting it and sending it through the Attorney General's office, and it's been approved, and they really love that model. It's a really clean, simple model. Yes.
David Libby, 312 Boston Road. I'd just like to know what's going to happen to the dispensaries once Massachusetts goes recreational marijuana.
Okay. So we're gonna kind of hop to the next question, because we'll handle them both at the same time. So if you want to read number 2, we might as well just jump right to that too.
Okay.
They intertwine. This is kind of the importance of it.
And to add section, this is 4D, temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments.
All right. Moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments. As most of you know, last year, the state legislature, there's a petition, and the voters of the Commonwealth decided to allow recreational marijuana. There are several parts to that legislation. The first part, which most everybody knew about, was it allows the personal consumption and grow of marijuana. You have up to 5 plants for your personal use. You can gift up to a certain amount. You can have a certain amount on you. That allowance isn't touched by local regulation at all. That is what it is. It is in place, has been in place since December 13th. You can grow your own, you can gift your own, you can do your own stuff with no regulation. What we're talking about with recreational marijuana establishments is the commercial and business end of that use, okay? And the tricky thing about the recreational marijuana legislation is that it wasn't as well written as the medical. It's more of a framework with not a lot of detail at all. And one of the biggest issues with the recreational marijuana bylaw is that, unlike this bylaw that is regulated through the Department of Public Health because of its medical tie, the recreational legislation requires the creation of a whole new legislative or regulatory body called the Cannabis Control Commission, or the CCC. That does not exist. So if you're following this at all, and I do have links on the planning board's page if you want to kind of look at all this information, the governor recently had to kind of go back because the budget for last year was already set. He recently had to go back and add $4 million worth of funding in one article, another $800,000 in another article, to fund this agency, the CCC that doesn't exist right now. It is the CCC's job to make the detailed regulations on how we will regulate recreational marijuana retail stores, recreational marijuana growers, recreational marijuana testing facilities, recreational marijuana processing facilities. So that CCC has until March 15th of next year to do their draft regulations, just their draft. 2 weeks later, they have to start taking applications for actual retailers, cultivators, you name it. 2 weeks later. They're not required to do final regulations until August of next year. If any of you follow the town meeting process in town, we have 2 a year. The warrant for those town meetings closes 60 days before the dates of the town meetings. So CCC comes out with their draft regulations on March 15th, it's already too late for us to even copy theirs and make them our local regs and get them on the warrant. It's already too late. So we don't have time to do local regulations that are consistent with the state regulations. And by the time they come out with their final regulations, it's technically already too late for fall town meeting, but at least we'll have those draft regulations and we can start formulating our own regulation and feel at least halfway decent about being consistent with the state regs. So we've asked for a moratorium, basically push the pause button until next Halloween. That allows us time to see the draft regs in March, hopefully they come out with those, and use those to formulate our own local bylaws. Have the public discourse we need to have on that, and have an article ready for fall town meeting to be voted by the residents. To regulate, the same way we're regulating medical marijuana, to regulate recreational marijuana, okay? Why are the two tied together? Because the recreational marijuana legislation is just a very broad kind of skeleton, and it has some language in it which calls a number of things into question. There's actually a series of public hearings starting actually this Friday is I think the first one in tonight is the first one in Shrewsbury. Started at 4 o'clock tonight till 8 o'clock tonight, informational meetings on this. Because the language is kind of dicey, one of the things it says is wherever you allow, and I alluded to this earlier, wherever you allow or have, again, it's not clear on whether you actually have to have a medical facility on the ground or whether you just have to have an area where it's allowed. You cannot prohibit recreational marijuana. So this is one of the things where the board said, yikes, there's no regs on recreational marijuana. We don't even know what that animal looks like. We don't know what's involved. We're not opening up 800 acres to something we don't understand. Doesn't matter if it's recreational marijuana, doesn't matter if it's drive-through restaurants. It's not good planning to open up 800 acres of land to something you don't know what it's all about. So that's why this article was affected by that legislation by shrinking down the number of area where you can do this, because of the weird language of the other legislation that appears to say wherever you allow this, you automatically allow the other, even though you don't know anything about it yet. Okay? So that's the tie between those two. The other thing that comes into play with recreational marijuana is a policy decision, and this isn't to be discussed here because the planning board has no say in it. I just want to make you aware of it. And you might have seen some talk about it in the Millbury Sun Chronicle and the Telegram last week. But part of the recreational legislation says that by election ballot, and again, weird wording, and also by bylaw, or it's not clear, so we would do both if this came to it, the selectmen and only the selectmen can place an article on a local election to prohibit recreational marijuana establishments, and that can be all of them, or they can pick and choose. They can say retail's no good, but cultivation's fine. So they can pick and choose. It's my understanding, because I had to give them the presentation and tell them they need to decide what they want to do, because town council has advised, again, because of the language and the weird deadlines, that if you're going to let the town consider a prohibition locally, you need to do it sooner than later. That was town council's advice. So they are putting an article, it's my understanding, on the May 23rd town meeting election to for residents to vote whether they want to prohibit recreational establishments altogether or not. Again, that's a policy decision. Only the selectmen can address that issue and put it on the ballot. So if you have questions about why they've decided to put that to the voters, you can certainly ask them in their selectmen's meetings. I just want to make sure you're aware of the whole topic and everything that's kind of swirling on this issue. Okay, so I'm trying to think if I forgot anything, because it's a big, big subject. So moratorium's just a pause button. If the prohibition is not, if people decide in Sutton, no, we're good with recreational marijuana in the majority, then we've pushed our pause button until next fall. We have plenty of time to see those draft regs and do our draft regulations and have a bunch of months where the public can come into meetings. We can all work together and craft the regulations with the state draft regs in hand and make those decisions as a community. So, along with the planning board, of course. So that's the deal. If town residents vote to prohibit at an election, then because of the weird language of the legislation, we also will be putting a bylaw article, like these bylaws, on the fall town meeting to add a bylaw in our zoning bylaw to also prohibit recreational marijuana. Again, the language is really weird, and it's not clear whether you need just a ballot question or a bylaw or both. So town council, always being of the belts and suspenders persuasion, says the language isn't clear, do both. If your town wants to prohibit it, do both. Now, there are well over a dozen pieces of legislation pending as we speak to address the amorphous stuff in the recreational marijuana legislation and to hopefully clear some of it up. The governor himself has appointed a legislative committee and has requested they have revisions and clarification to the past legislation on his desk by the beginning of May, just to answer the things that aren't clear. Not really to say yes or no again, just to say, oh, we don't know what this means, we don't know what that means, fix it, just tell us what it means. So that's kind of where that stands.
Do we have more than one choice where these locations are going to be?
If recreational marijuana is not prohibited, then the board will begin the process. Once they have the state's draft regulations in hand next March, they'll begin the process in whatever, I don't know if they'll appoint a subcommittee or citizens group or whatever. They'll begin the process of taking those regs, drafting our regs, and working with that committee to decide where it's appropriate for the recreational uses to be allowed. The one weird thing about actually both of these is they don't really split the uses apart. If you look at the definitions in the legislation, it is medical marijuana establishments and it's recreational marijuana establishments. They don't do medical marijuana retail, medical marijuana cultivation. So right now it's a lump, and that's one of the other things that needs to be clarified. Can you say retail's fine in the retail district, but we'd like to leave the growing in the industrial districts? The other important thing, if you're familiar with Mass General Law, is agriculture is exempt from zoning to the large part. The recreational marijuana legislation made it extremely clear. Both medical and recreational growing, not an agricultural use under the law, not exempt. So that was clarified, which is nice, because that's a big, big question. So, okay?
So let's go, get some questions and
Get that lady's name.
Is there a water supply?
wait a sec, before you ask your question, need to identify yourself and where you live.
I'm sorry. My name is Yvette Picard, and I'm from Darling Lane, 14 Darling Lane. And she still hasn't answered my question. Do we have more than one choice?
Yes, you have the whole town's worth of choices when we go to craft the recreational marijuana bylaw. The board has chosen medical marijuana for the time being only here. And
One choice.
that's what the board has chosen for medical. Right here for right now in this 114 acres or 120 acres, because of all the reasons I've already stated.
So you can stay tuned, because when we finally
We
get
may
to
add
that,
more.
we'll have another one of these, and you can hear where we think
Yeah,
there's a good
we
idea to
may-
put this
Yeah,
stuff.
we may add more, but we gotta figure out what's happening with recreational.
Right,
Sorry.
go ahead,
Trying to be clear, it's just so complicated.
go ahead.
Carla Stem, 190 Central Turnpike, Sutton. Is there water supply into this
Here?
area?
Yep, water, sewer, yep.
And is that through the,
Through Whitensville Water District in
okay,
the town of Northbridge. That's a brand new 10 years old, brand new 16-inch water main and sewer line.
thank you.
You bet.
Any questions on the board? Any other questions in the public? I think we want to move on these articles before we move on.
Okay.
So let's do the,
Number 3.
no,
Let's do-
I want to vote,
do
I want to
voting.
vote to, so we don't
Oh, okay.
pile
Does
them up
anybody
at the
have any
end.
questions on the board recommending articles? Is everybody clear on? They're required by law to state whether they recommend town meeting vote to approve something or not. It does not prohibit it from going to town meeting. It still goes to the town meeting floor no matter what. It's just, if they vote to disapprove something, it can't come back for 2 years unless you change it a lot.
I encourage you all to come to town meeting and see how the government works here in town of Sutton. Interesting process. All right, so let's do number 1 first, registered medical marijuana dispensaries. This is a, these are sponsored by
You.
us. So do we have a motion one way or the other that we would sponsor this article, or not sponsor, but
Recommend.
recommend this article or not?
Make
Make,
a-
go
Go
ahead.
ahead.
Make a motion to recommend registered medical marijuana dispensaries overlay.
And then we'll do.
Second.
As
Any other-
described.
as described. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
I
5. Temporary, now number 2, temporary moratorium on recreational marijuana establishments.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained?
Okay.
All right.
Informational purposes, town meeting is May 8th, 7 o'clock. And that's where the rubber hits the road. Any zoning articles have to be approved by 2/3 of those present and voting. All zoning issues require a supermajority vote for approval, not a simple majority. Supermajority, okay?
All right, number 3. You gonna read this, Bob?
We had
This is-
section
Yeah.
5E, Village Center Overlay District and Map.
Whew, okay. All right. Village Center Overlay District. First off, can I just have the hands of my VCOD peeps in the room who have worked so hard on this regulation since last June. I just want you to see, this is like a teeny tardy part of the group, and Nick's not raising his hands, but he was part of it.
Because I'm not a peep.
No, you're a peep? What do you want? Curmudgeon? My favorite curmudgeon? I love it.
Yeah, my favorite.
Okay. All right, so my esteemed committee members that have been working on this bylaw since June. It's a complicated, long bylaw. This is the text. If you've got the copy, you've got the text. I'm going to try to summarize, and then we have our committee members who can jump in if I forget something or help me clarify. But last year, a resident brought forward a zoning petition. The owner of Posies and Presents over in Wilkinsonville. The Polly's Antiques building was for sale, and she wanted to move her flower shop into Polly's Antiques. And she came to my office, as several people have, with respect to the Beehive building, Sutton Center Store, and Polly's Antiques, and said, I can do this, right? It's just a flower shop. And I said, no. This is the rural residential district, as you saw in that last zoning district, the center of town, and 92.3% of the rest of town, this is the center of town, are zoned rural residential. You can't do businesses here. The only reason there are businesses there is because they're grandfathered. They've been there since before zoning and Sutton. Okay? So, you can only use Polly's Antiques for the same use it's been used for the immediate past. So, antique shop / gallery type use and the multifamily apartments that are in that building. The Beehive, unfortunately, has been vacant for well over 2 years, which is the abandonment or discontinuance period. So the Beehive can't be used for anything but those uses allowed in the rural residential, like a single-family home, mortuary, a few other random uses, none of which are very well suited to that building. So, she did a great job of bringing forward some innovative bylaws, but there was very short time for the board to consider that bylaw. And they said, you know what, we can't in good faith recommend this complicated bylaw that would allow this, but we do commit to forming a group to look into creating a village center overlay district to allow some additional uses that might encourage the reuse of structures like Polly's Antiques and the Beehive, because nobody is going to invest money in those structures unless they have, in most cases, an income-producing option to pay for the rehab of those kind of structures or the upkeep. So what we did, the board asked that I include Sutton Center and West Sutton, both areas that have historic village centers, although different kinds. So we had to start with somewhere. So we took the national historic districts in these areas. This national historic district has over 100 properties in it. The West Sutton Historic District has over 60 properties in it. We notified one-on-one every property owner in those districts and said, look, we're considering this bylaw, we'd love you to participate. And a good chunk of people, good in planning terms, put it that way, over 24 people said, you know what, I'd like to participate in this discussion. We focused on Sutton Center in the initial effort, but you'll see the bylaws that we crafted easily apply to pretty much any of our historic districts in terms of timeframes and the regulation. So we will be looking to West Sutton for fall town meeting and talking about what area over there in West Sutton might be appropriate to add to the VCOD district. All right, so we've had the varied group of individuals working since last June. What's been a great part of the process is we had, walking in the door, we had individuals who said, we're not changing anything ever over my dead body, and we had individuals that say, where's the tavern, or 2 or 3? So a varied group of people. We didn't have a chairperson, we didn't have vice chairs. Everything in this group was done by a majority vote. And there was really great discussion. In the beginning, we had the assistance of our regional planning agency and Jeff Bagg, who gave us kind of a sample bylaw to start with that they're working on. He's now using our bylaw as their sample bylaw. So, and we went through an extensive process. Again, on the planning board page is a summary of every meeting, every piece of paper that all the members got. You can watch the meetings on the town's website. What are the major features of this bylaw? And again, I've got it here, every word of it. I'm happy to look at all the details, but I'm just going to touch on the major features. So again, we started with this big area. And kind of like with the last medical marijuana overlay bylaw, this is a new animal. And the board said, you know what? We originally were talking about, the committee said, we were originally talking about this. Again, the majority of the committee present on the night this issue was voted, so we're clear on that. Said, you know, we originally focused on this because of these structures right here at the intersection. So why don't we kind of focus on that area first, and then over time, and the good thing about an overlay district is you can add areas wherever it's appropriate and wherever town meeting, again, the voters at town meeting feel it's appropriate to add this type of bylaw. So the starter area went from this down to this. So it's a very small area. It is the Polly's Antiques. The Beehive and the Sutton Center Store are on the same parcel with this funny little dog leg out here. This is the town of Sutton owns this. The high school was previously located on this parcel. And the blacksmith shop. So it's a very small area to start. Again, when you're talking a new animal and you go to a town meeting floor and you need a 2/3 vote, it's often easier to just start small and go from there. Let people see how it functions or doesn't function and build on that. So it's a very small area right now. All right, this is an overlay district, so we're not changing the zoning. The zoning in this corner is still rural residential. As the name would imply, we're laying a layer of zoning over the top of the existing zoning. This layer allows commercial and business uses not otherwise allowed in the rural residential district, and I can go over some of those with you. It also prohibits some of the uses that are allowed right now in that district, again, in this small area for a number of reasons. It limits the size of structures to 6,000 square feet. For reference, the Beehive right now, excluding the basement, is just under 6,000 square feet. add in the basement, it's just over 6,000 square feet. The Sutton Center store, that whole building, including the garage bays that are attached, is just over 7,000 square feet. But the active part is under 3,000 square feet. So just for size reference. It requires new structures and existing uses to meet new design requirements. So anything new you build or additions you put on, you have to meet the new design regs. Even if you do a use that's allowed in the underlying zoning. So you knock all this down, you own it, you can do what you want with it. You knock it all down and put up a single family home, that's an allowed use in the underlying zoning, but even that single family home has to meet these hopped up design requirements. Why? This is a National Historic District. As you walk around, which the committee members were encouraged to do, you really see the unique natures of a lot of the buildings in this area that make it unique, make it special and worthy of National Register listing. So you want any new structure that goes up to be consistent in both its size and its design, but also in terms of where it's placed on a lot. Another thing you'll notice about the structures in this district is they're very typical 1700, 1800 structures in that they're up near the road. They're not pushed back 50 feet like our current zoning allows in the rest of the town. So these actually require buildings to be pushed back no more than 25 feet, or if you have a building on either side of you, one at 10, one at 20, the average is 15, your building can't go back further than 15 feet because you'll ruin the streetscape and the look of the village line. Okay? So this bylaw requires specific architecture and building placement, and as you might guess, smaller signage. It also allows a consideration for public parking to be counted in your parking requirements, because we are always looking at the development of potential public parking lots in this part of town, particularly on two parcels the town owns, here and up here at 16 Uxbridge. Nothing definite or anything yet, but that's definitely being considered. So if those lots are developed, then those parking spaces can be considered to meet parking needs or a portion of them within those uses. So I just want to hit the highlight in terms of uses and prohibitions. Again, both the master plan that was done by the town a number of years back, again with a lot more people participating from a planning perspective, and this process and discussion before the planning board over the years, people have said we'd love to have some ways to encourage tax-based creation and some businesses outside our strips, outside of 146 and 122A, but in a controlled and size-appropriate manner. So the committee, the majority of the committee basically said these things. You can have multifamily dwellings up to 4 units. You had 6 in the Beehive, you have 4 in Polly's Antiques. Yes, Donna? 4? Business and professional offices, so your CPA, your attorney. A neighborhood market, an antique shop, art studio, gallery, gift shop, flower shop, candy shop, craft shop, artisan live workspace, restaurants full service, restaurant limited service, catering accessory to the main use. So if you have a full service restaurant, you can also cater from that facility if you get the permit. Bakery, cafe, tea room, tavern, pub, theater, dinner theater, and inn. All of these uses are either defined in our overall bylaw or right within these regulations that are proposed. And again, all of those definitions, I obviously went out and got the sample definitions in the committee, kind of worked with them to make them Sutton-esque. As is everywhere else in town, you can do mixed structures and mixed uses on a lot, as long as you meet the requirements. You have enough lot to do 2 structures, or you have enough parking to do 2 uses, you can do that. And this is what I was talking about with these uses here are currently allowed in the rural residential district. But the committee said, you know what? In this little area, in this VCOD area, we don't think these uses are appropriate. They don't work, they don't fit in that area. So they've specifically prohibited a cemetery, a town equipment garage. This is a country, hunting, fishing, tennis, or health club, usually a big facility. Public utility, Agriculture on less than 5 acres. Again, agriculture on more than 5 acres is protected under state law, but on less than 5 acres, you can regulate. So they said, you know what, right there, doesn't really work. Veterinary office, convalescent or nursing home, communication and television towers, and commercial kennels. So again, the committee considered these and said, these don't really, even though they're allowed right now, you could go open a commercial kennel right now in Sutton Center. If this is enacted, you can't in this district. You can't here. You can do it right there, but you cannot do it right here. These Ps and these Ss, what do these mean? An S is a special permit. That is a yes/no vote by the permitting authority, in this case, the planning board. They have broader powers to really consider the effects of a use on an area and on a specific location. They can request much more detailed studies. It is an additional permit and a stronger planning tool than just site plan review. So it's an extra hurdle. It doesn't generally take extra time because the planning board grants both of these permits, but it is safer, so to speak. Okay, this is a yes/no vote. P, so everything that has an S also goes through an approval process called site plan review, which is how many parking do you need, what's your sign look like, where's your landscaping, what's your hours of operation, tell me about your employees and the truck trips to your building. It's all the details. So where you see a P, that's just site plan. So there's no yes/no vote, it's just a P, permitted, and you go through, again, public hearing process, but the board can't say no unless there's a life safety issue that is unmasked during the hearing process, okay? So where you see a P, these are in effect uses that the committee thought might fit better or might be okay to encourage in these areas. Because this one, even though it's handled by the planning board, same public hearing, it's a little more risky having an S. Okay, so they have encouraged basically business and professional office. They've encouraged these limited retail uses. They've encouraged an artist and live workspace. They've encouraged catering if you have one of the other uses, not a big deal. And they've encouraged this bakery, cafe, tea room use. The other uses, at least for the time being, unless the bylaws change in the future, two-step process. Okay? As you can see on the summary sheet that I put together, part of this process was literally going around the whole area and photographing. Photographing what makes it special, what makes it a unique place within the town of Sutton. And so you'll see within the design guidelines requirements that basically, again, if you don't own it, you don't control it. So if somebody came in and knocked down everything on that lot and they wanted to build new because it was more cost effective or whatever, they have to meet these design guidelines. So you will at least end up, hopefully, with a structure that does not exceed 6,000 square feet and that excuse me, is consistent with the time period of architecture since 1720 to 1900, which a lot of these buildings are, most of these buildings, and that includes a majority of these design elements that make these buildings very special. Again, this is all reviewed in a public hearing process. Every public hearing in the town of Sutton before the planning board is automatic notice to abutters within 300 feet of the property lines, notice in the Millbury Sun Chronicle, posted on the town's website, posted on the front of the town hall. So, so that's the meat of it. Did I forget anything, committee members? Anything big? No. Great group of committee members who are already dragging into sign bylaw creation for the fall. So this is good. All right, any questions on the Village Center Overlay District? Wow.
There you go.
In the back.
Donald, 312 Boston Road. One of my concerns, we live right next to Polly's, or the parsonage, as the Hill Should Be North. is parking, because that little big word if parking isn't approved in this parcel here or public parking, where is that all going to be happening?
Okay, so parking, what we did was, originally, we had some pretty kind of foofy language in there. That town council, when he reviewed the bylaw, said, not doing that. You have to have firm regulations to compare your site elements to. So what we've said in our bylaw is, we have very firm existing parking regulations that say basically, for example, a restaurant, you have to have one parking space for every 3 seats, plus a parking space for every employee on your largest shift. Okay, that's a requirement. The parking regulations allow exceptions, waivers, if the proponent proves they don't need all that parking, that big chunk, if they prove that. So what we're starting with is you've got to meet the current regulations. You have to. If you don't want to meet the current regulations, you have to prove, as you do today, why you are due a waiver, why your use will work. It won't create on-street parking, it won't create issues, other than the occasional wacky person who you cannot possibly regulate all the wacky people out. So this will give you a base, a firm base to start with, the ability to waive with cause. And then the only thing that's really different from our existing bylaw is the consideration that we've talked about and maybe moving forward with some public parking here in Sutton Center, that if you have public parking and it's not being used, particularly after hours, why would you make somebody put more parking down on a site right next door to public parking that's free at night, and open? So if we develop a public parking lot, not on-street parking, then the proponents who are coming in looking for, trying to meet a parking requirement can say, hey, the majority of people come in after hours, there's 30 public parking spaces next door, we'd like the board to consider saying 10 of our spaces we need are handled within that public parking lot. So this is the only thing that's really different from our existing parking regs. Otherwise, you have to meet the current parking regulations unless you make a valid argument, as judged by the planning board and those present at the hearing, that you don't need the full amount of parking that's otherwise required. So, very structured, very defined set of parking regs.
All right, we have a planning board member who has a question.
Parking in Sutton Center tonight
Tough,
is a big issue.
absolutely.
Can you imagine if the police, who are here in Sutton Center, went out and put a ticket on everyone's car that's parked illegally? You can't park on the common. We have great neighbors at the Congo Church who let you park there. So it's not new news. It's it needs to be addressed. And as a planning board, that's why we have to engage in this conversation. If we want things to change and more people to come, they are going to have to park somewhere. When I come to the meetings, I walk because I don't want to be another car in the parking lot. There is no place to park. The town hall can't conduct business. Your police and fire department can't show up for work and park any place legally. So it's something that the planning board has to wrestle with. But we wrestle with it like you all did tonight. You just get as close as you can, and you walk over. And there have been no tickets, and it shouldn't be, because it's a dilemma. And a parking problem is a good thing. It's because I'm in business. The only people who don't have parking problems, the only towns that don't have parking problems, have no business, and they're dying and they're withering on the vine. So we're very fortunate to have a parking problem in Sutton Center with nothing going on.
Right. And public parking is more of a policy issue in most towns. So the planning board can encourage the Board of Selectmen and the policymakers to kind of look at that issue, and especially when you have nights like tonight where Bob's pointing out parking was a challenge, I'm sure. But that's always a good thing for the selectmen and the administrator to hear from residents as well. I had to walk from just to go to that meeting that we all wanted to go to. So that is a policy decision. That decision will be made at that level. but the planning board certainly, and myself included, as their staff, have certainly had these discussions and continue to encourage potential public parking.
Any other questions from the public?
Sorry, me again. There's no secret here that we are not for any change in Sutton Center whatsoever. So part of the reason we were part of this committee is to be able to put in or have some input to this, majority rules, of course, but we wanted our voices heard. Could you please tell the group the definition of spot zoning
Absolutely.
and what that entails?
And why this isn't? Yes. All right. Spot zoning is actually, at this point in time in the state of Massachusetts, a relatively antiquated term. And why do I say that? Is because basically what spot zoning is you have our zoning map, which is this one. If I say, here's the business district, and I live right here, and I want to be business, I'm going to get 10 signatures from registered voters, and I'm going to put an article in the town meeting warrant that says, we're rezoning my house to business. Because I want to, as Bob Recor said in our meetings, I want to open Bob's Burgers and Beers at my house. So if I put forth an article that just rezones an area that's for my interest only, one person, my interest only, and is a relatively small area, or even for multiple people's interest, but is a little area, under 10 acres in general. In the past, everything we do at town meeting ultimately goes to the Attorney General. The Attorney General weighs what you did at town meeting against Mass General Law, the Zoning Act, and they say, is there a conflict? And weird animal, in Massachusetts, the Zoning Act is a loose framework about zoning laws, and every decision made by the superior courts and all of the appellate courts with respect to zoning forms the law on zoning. So if the law is X today and tomorrow one of the appellate courts changes the law to Y or does a different interpretation, that's the new law on that subject. So it's always moving, always changing, okay? So, train of thought derailing, just a second. Okay. So, in the past, when I was first a planner, many moons ago, the Attorney General would see something kind of on the border. It's only for one person. It's 50 acres, but it's only for one person. Or it's for 3 people, but it's less than 10 acres. And they would say, that is spot zoning. That's a tiny little area that is not an extension of an existing zone, like stretching out the zone, which is just a zoning extension of a zoning district, which cannot be challenged as spot zoning. They'd say, no, you're basically trashing the overall zoning plan in your town by doing this little spot of crud over here that's not consistent with the overall zoning. That is called spot zoning. An overlay district is not a zoning, it's a district, but it's not a strict zoning district. Laying zoning regulation over your existing layers is never challenged as spot zoning. It's not. It's just state law, case law. It's never challenged. And flat zoning, like these existing static zoning districts, have not been challenged, even adding little spots of that here and there. In the last 15 years, the Attorney General hasn't even denied or challenged any of those. What they say is they'll make sure there's no absolute conflict with the law, and then they put at the bottom of their letter, we're cautioning you that this is a relatively small area and you could end up in court. But spot zoning is almost never denied by the Attorney General last 15 years. They basically defer to the will of town meeting. If the town's residents, 2/3 of those present and voting at town meeting, say, I can have Bob's Burgers and Beers, the AG says, fine. You could end up in court, but fine. Okay?
Any other questions? So the thing that we talked about, parking, and, no, signs.
Sign?
The sign modifications in here are pretty small signs.
Baby signs.
But we did that because we recognized that maybe come fall, we'll have a new sign bylaw that would readdress the signage in here.
Right, and just, again, for comparison, the signs are limited to 30 square feet. The BP sign that's out there, 30 square feet. Polly's Antique sign looks bigger, 24 square feet. The round sign to the right of the door at Sutton Center Store, 20 square feet. So the biggest sign in the existing area right now is 30 square feet, so that's where they're capped. And then the committee, again, will be looking at maybe in these areas, again, really honing in on the design of signs, like the design of buildings. But in the interim, for right now, we wanted to at least cap the size and say what other things you absolutely can't have. So you can't have internal illumination, and you can't, your sign can't be bigger than 10 foot high, because these areas are very pedestrian scale, so you don't want a 30-foot high sign up there. You want to keep them down at people level.
Are there any questions here on the board?
Yeah, I have one.
Any questions? Yeah.
I know one of the potential benefits of this is, we have, a few historic structures in this district, and with the current zoning, it doesn't apply for a lot of use, which one of them is already in pretty tough shape as far as the structure goes. And the fear is over time, the others may follow without any use of income to keep the building supported. So this is definitely a good use of potentially providing some other options to keep these structures. But in the event if someone does buy it and decide to tear one of them down, did you consider a demolition delay? Just
No.
to think about other options so that, because part of the intent is to try to keep this
Right.
as,
The committee did not consider demolition delay. As you know, we've talked about demolition delay in the past, which basically says if you go to pull down a particular type of building, there's a minimum amount of time where you cannot act on that demolition permit, and a public review and commentary period is required. We've talked about that and kind of brought it partway through the process in the past, and it's drawn a lot of fire, mainly because you get into private property rights. If I have a building that's dangerous, particularly one I've been ordered to demolish by the building department, and you're telling me I can't touch it for at least 6 months, sometimes 9 months or a year, depending on what the bylaw says, it's mine. I owe it. Who are you to tell me how long I have to do it? And P.S., unless a structure or a property is actually restricted, and National Register is really a status symbol, okay? It doesn't come with regulation. It does come with the ability if something's going to be delayed, and particularly through demolition delay bylaw for Mass Historic to comment and come out and tell you why it's special and why it should be saved if it can be saved. But there's no, in the end, it allows the public to have a say, but unless the public wants to step up and buy it, it doesn't prohibit the demolition of structures. It just, as the name implies, delays the demolition. So that drew a lot of fire on the last time it was brought up. So because we're trying to provide some options, particularly for the at-risk structures here in the near future, because parties have expressed an interest in potentially buying and rehabbing those structures, we didn't want to, at least, it was more my call than the committee's, introduce a potentially volatile element to the bylaw that might pull down the whole bylaw. It's not that we wouldn't consider it going forward, but it has the potential, because of the discussion that's gone on in the past, to just trash the whole bylaw. So we'll proceed with this, and then we'll continue to have that discussion, because there is some valuable information in that discussion. But that's why it was not considered as part of this bylaw. Primarily my decision to begin with.
We good? Any questions? No. I have the motion.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we recommend the Village Center Overlay District and Map be added to section, what is that, 5E?
Yep.
second.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained?
All right. All right, we have 3 petition articles. If anybody wants to escape, do it now. All right, yeah. First, can you read the first one and I'll get out the map?
Number 4, to amend Article 3 A4, Table 1, Section capital F. Table of use regulations to allow the sale of automobiles over 26,000 pounds in the industrial districts. It's by petition. And who's the petitioner?
The proponent is Dan Cower. I'm just going to give you a note right up front. Dan is talking about adding this use, which he's going to explain in a minute, to the industrial districts. This is a blow-up of this portion of the zoning map where the industrial districts exist. This is the town line. This right here is where Honeydew used to be, where Blackstone Cafe is, right there. This is the old industrial park behind. So that is industrial area back there. Across the street under the high tension lines is industrial. And then from Harback Road, if you're going 146 north, from Harback Road to just shy of Colonial Road. So this is, who is that? Is that, this is Extra Mart, this one is, I forget which business this is, but just shy of Colonial Road and all the way to Dudley Road. So where Lemires is, Stone Gates, Lord and Propane, those are all in this industrial area. Okay, so those are the only industrial areas in the town of Sutton. The other areas, these ones are office light industrial, different district. Okay?
And Jen, let people know that what just happened here.
Oh, okay. Planning board has 6 members, 5 full standing members and 1 associate. Wally Baker is the associate member. When a member believes they have a conflict or believes a conflict will be perceived, they may step off the board or encouraged to step off the board, and the associate member steps in as a full acting member in their place. Ms. Sanderson has decided she has a perceived or otherwise conflict, so she's stepping off the board. And Wally Baker is now acting in her place.
So go ahead, we'll recognize you if you'd like to explain the logic for your petition.
My name is Dan Cower. I'm the owner of Environmental Equipment. We're an equipment body distributor on 11 John Road in Sutton. And I came in front of all of you a year ago to, I don't know what the technical term was, we had to change the zoning,
You got site plan approval?
Site plan approval.
Site plan.
There's restrictions with selling wheeled vehicles, automobiles, trucks, heavy equipment. We sell the bodies on top of the trucks and.
Trash trucks.
Trash trucks,
Okay.
specifically, the bodies, not the truck. So, and the business is going well, and I'm grateful for being in Sutton. We're doing well. But what I didn't realize at the time when I petitioned to get whatever I had to get started, without a Massachusetts Class 1 or Class 2 dealer's license, which you need to sell chassis, my intention is not to sell chassis. I can't even demonstrate chassis. I can't deliver chassis. I can't, when the factory, Heil, the company I represent, has demo trucks that you can take to a customer, show them how to operate it, let them operate it, and run it. We can't even get it's called a dealer's plate to do that without this license. That's the primary reason I want to get it, is so that I can get a dealer's license to have demo plates.
All right.
I can have a repair plate, based because I have a repair garage, but legally you shouldn't demo. I don't know if demos, that's what we call it, is there? Demonstrate vehicles to potential customers on a repair plate. I think there's a conflict with insurance when you do that. And that kind of limits opportunities for my business.
Right.
Does this allow you to mount the body on a chassis?
I believe we can mount the body on the chassis today.
Okay.
But we can't sell a completed unit that way. So the way I work it today is I'll give an example of, not too far from here is Ballard Mac. It's a big Mac dealer in the state, Tri-State Freightliner. We sell the body to them, they sell the package to the customer. But I say the factory has demonstrator units that we can show customers. We can't do that unless it's a sold unit, so it's inhibiting the sale of the trucks.
So the problem Mr. Cower is running up against is way back before I got here, the residents of the town of Sutton at an annual town meeting by a 2/3 vote said no more car dealers in the town of Sutton. they said, at the time, you see a very big difference now, but at the time, car dealer buildings were lower value buildings. They didn't have a ton of employees. They were a sea of pavement. And again, very little land within the town of Sutton for tax-based creation. So the residents at that time said, we don't want all that little bit of area we have eaten up with paved parking lots and auto dealerships. The term automobile under zoning law, state law, includes anything with wheels that self-propels, basically. So, trash trucks, dump trucks, RVs, autos, pickups, fire trucks, anything with wheels and a motor that can move itself around is an automobile. So, right now, the only automobile dealers you see in town are, again, grandfathered dealers that existed before town meeting changed that bylaw. You might see the names on them change. If you have one that's grandfathered and you want to sell it to a new guy, you can do that as long as there's not a 2-year gap in there where you're not using the use. After 2 years, it's abandoned, you're done. So the ones you see are grandfathered uses. Otherwise, you can't do automobile used or new dealers anywhere in the town of Sutton. So he needs to accomplish what he wants to do. He needs to allow, what he's asking in this case is to allow as a permitted use, not a special permit, allow as a permitted use the sale of vehicles over 26,000 pounds. Now, we had put in gross vehicle weight. My only comment on that is I'm learning more about those terms than I'd like to know. Gross vehicle weight is fully loaded. Driver, passenger, crud in the back of the thing. So that I would recommend that you maybe just adjust the motion if it moves forward to town meeting to curb weight. Curb weight is your dealer delivers it to you with a full tank of gas and your oil and your fluids all full. It's that weight, the delivered weight. So, and we have at least one expert in the group who can correct me if I'm wrong about that term. So that's just research. So gross vehicle weight includes more weight than you would normally want.
But we're only looking to sell very large trucks, not
Right.
little cars and pickups, and it's not a high volume like you would be with an automobile. We're talking 12 to 25 a year versus potentially several hundred other types of trucks. So.
So the one thing you have to remember about zoning changes, Mr. Cower is asking to allow large vehicle sales in industrial areas of town. So he has already gone through site plan review to get his use, and we'll have to talk to the board about the Class 1, Class 2 license if this passes town meeting, if additional review is allowed. But anybody who wants to can also apply, if this passes town meeting, to sell large vehicles, those over 26,000 pounds curb weight, hopefully, in the industrial areas. So he's done a smart thing in terms of getting something through town meeting by limiting the area that has potential exposure and by restricting the class to a smaller class of vehicles and generally a higher value vehicle.
Just so I'm clear, number 2 on the current list here, we're revising number 2. We're adding a new number 5.
We're adding a new number. So we'd be adding
A whole new line. That's going to be
whole new
5.
line.
It'll be 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, it's by petition. The planning board and the planning department can't adjust a petition once it's been filed. That's the will of the voters through their signature on a petition. So what the board can do tonight is if they don't love everything that you've proposed, they can vote to recommend. They can vote to not recommend. It still goes to town meeting, but it goes without their recommendation. They can vote to recommend just like it is, or they can vote to recommend if you adjust a few things within the scope of the original petition, okay? So based on what they hear from you and what they talk about amongst themselves, if some little tweak will make them feel better about the bylaw or make you feel better about the bylaw, the board can consider that and make a motion accordingly. And then it would go to town meeting and the petitioner can decide to revise their motion
Sure.
in concert with what the board has recommended, or they can just go with their motion and let the chips fall where they may. Okay?
So are there any questions from the audience? Go ahead.
Again, Pat Morris, 11 Johnson Road. Well, within the scope of the petition, I would ask the petitioner if he could make a change, or if not, I would ask the board to make a change. And that would be is that if you vote to approve this, do not make it a permitted use, but make it by special permit. And I'll use your own words, and it's also that it's stronger, it's safer, right, Jennifer? And it's also consistent with what you've done with the village overlay too. I'm concerned. I mean, I'm very, very sympathetic to what he's doing, and I love having business here in town, especially since I'm on the finance committee. We don't have enough business in town. But this is something that once we open this up, it is highly visible, and I happen to have lived here when we changed the thing for automobiles, and we did it for a good reason back then, and I think those same reasons are still consistent. So if this is hidden away somewhere, and we can keep it hidden away, I hope your business grows like wildfire, but it does need a lot of restrictions, and again, I would ask that either the petitioner or the board make a special permit if you allow it. Thank you.
Anything else?
I do.
Go ahead, Wayne.
I have a question in regard to changing the GVW to the curb weight of the vehicle. Do you currently mount bodies on any single axle trucks?
I'm not currently mounting bodies today.
Do you
I
even-
could, but I currently am not.
Okay, so,
Could we mount a body on a single axle truck?
yes.
We could.
So, my question is, typical single axle truck is a 33,000 pound GVW. If you change the wording to a curb weight, that vehicle needs to weigh 26,000 plus empty. You're not gonna be able to do a single axle truck.
Single
And
axles is.
I think,
Sorry.
I think it's more defined using a GVW because it's going to be the manufacturer's plated weight and not having to go to a scale when the vehicle is finished and say, well, it weighs 25.5, I can't sell it.
Right.
That's my opinion.
We can, I appreciate that. We can restrict it to a certain class. We can say class 6, 7, and 8, which there are weight definitions behind that. Or we can say, whatever. We're dominantly class 8 vehicles. We have some class 6 and 7, nothing really below that.
Okay.
I did, just for your information, I did pull vehicle weight definitions off vehicle sales and servicing site, and I did put a star next to curb weight, so you have all the various definitions. And the thought with going with curb weight is just that gross vehicle weight is variable. It can vary, based on load or what you say the usual load is in terms of driver, passenger, and stuff in it. So we were just looking for a term that even, what's the one, when you buy a car, it's like the rating weight or whatever, the weight a vehicle is rated to be able to support.
And that's the gross vehicle weight rating is on the tag by the manufacturer.
Okay. Yeah,
And-
that's what
and
we
the
were
cur-
looking for.
The curb weight is not by the manufacturer.
Right, yeah. I'm not a person who knows these things, so
I-
I just
I-
wanted to make
I-
sure we have a number in there that's very defined.
I think, personal opinion, knowing about the GVW, and that's manufactured weight. And once he alters the vehicle, it has to be recertified.
Right.
And that GVW will be on the door tag from the manufacturer or the body application.
So stick with GVW as your recommendation.
Absolutely.
Smarter minds than mine.
Anything else?
I have a question. How many acres, Jen, how many acres are we exposing in industrial? How many acres do we have in industrial?
Oh, you would ask a question I cannot answer. I honestly don't know. If this is just shy of 400 here, you're talking well over 100 here. And then another probably 50 or 60 here.
And how much of
And a lot
that's,
of this is occupied, obviously.
right, and how much of that is exposed to like residential area,
Well, along Dudley Road.
Dudley Road?
You have the residential exposure along Dudley Road and to the back side of the houses on Colonial. And a little bit of exposure on Hardback. Of course, all of Hardback Road is already built businesses facing residences, so this is nothing new, obviously, in this area.
So in
But-
context to the town, the amount of acreage in town, it's a really small area.
Oh, yeah, so you're talking.
And
about
relatively
areas-
low impact to residences.
Right, there's always an impact,
There's always an
obviously.
impact, obviously, yeah.
But again, these are already industrially zoned, so you can already do any of our existing industrial uses. Some are, that are much more impactful than what you're proposing in these areas. But yeah, it's one more use that can be practiced in these areas.
I like the idea of the special permit.
Yeah.
That allows us to keep our, keep our eye on
Yeah.
it, because there may be some, I mean,
Does that take another year to do, or is it?
no,
It's
no,
the
no,
same
no.
night and the same process.
Same
the
night, same
work.
thing.
It's just a yes, no.
Okay, all right.
It's more control.
I'm cool with that. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
and the reason is, because I was on the planning board when we made these changes, and they were made for the right reason, but I recognize that the plans, good plans aren't cast in cement and don't have wiggle room.
Right.
And there may be some other opportunity to get a business to move to Sutton and generate taxes, to give the residents a break that, that we don't even know about tonight. And it's a vehicle that's being invented right now. I want to be able to say yes to any businessman that can come to Sutton and be a good fit. And to date, you've been a good fit all the way through, so I like the special permit.
I have no
if you
problem
change that.
doing that, if that's what the board would like me to do.
And I think that's an easy change to make.
And you can help me with that.
Yeah, that's,
That's something he has to do on the floor, right?
This we done on the
yeah,
floor.
I'm basically, any of the petitioners, as they move forward, the department works with them to make sure they have their motions for town meeting in the correct form, so at least nothing gets kicked on technicalities.
So you're not a resident of the town?
I am not, sir.
Tim Ryan from Oakhurst Road is the petitioner on this article.
Okay.
Make a motion.
So,
Yeah, any other comments in the audience? Okay, go ahead.
So make a motion to, for the planning board to support this article, to allow selling new and used automobiles at over 26,000 GVW, including not limited to trucks, construction equipment, and municipal equipment, with the requirement that on the floor be made an amendment to special permit for the planning board to review.
Second. Well, John.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
Aye.
Yeah.
Miriam, you back on?
I'm back on.
Okay. Tag in, tag out.
Get out of here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming in.
Okay. Associate members are in effect, have the same power, other than voting power. So, Mr. Baker can have the same input as every other board member, can take active part in any discussion. He just cannot vote on an issue when there's a full board standing. So,
All right, Bob, go ahead.
Number 5, to rezone 6.59 acres of land at 189 Central Turnpike from rural residential R1 to business highway B2 by petition. And the petition is present. All right, well, introduce yourself to us.
Good evening, Bill Wentz, 154 Dodge Hill Road, here on behalf of Lee Wentz and Lynn O'Neill's, owners of the property at 189 Central Turnpike. And what we'd like to do is extend the business zoning of B2, which, as we've all learned for the past 2 hours, started in Sutton at the Millbury-Sutton line on 146, heading south. And currently, the B2 zoning stops in the middle of Central Turnpike at the yellow line. So if you were to stand out in the yellow line, business B2 zoning stops right here. We're asking to extend B2 to include the rest of Central Turnpike, and it's actually 2.92 acres owned by Lynn O'Neill and Lee Wentz. The reason your petition says 6+ acres is because you have to include Central Turnpike. which obviously, as we all know, we can't do anything with Central Turnpike. That's where that stands today. Furthermore, we just would like, I live 1 mile from the property and am friendly with the butters here, so for the record, after getting stuff from the town, Andrews Survey, only .29 acres, because of the setbacks of B2 business development, will allow to be built on for business use. So with that, would be 12,730 square feet. Because of setbacks, we'd have to stay 100 feet off of the neighbor, Mr. Levitt's property. We'd have to stay 100 feet off of any other residential properties as well, including the land south, which is owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So it leaves us a very small space. So any scare tactics of a Dunkin' Donuts, a McDonald's, a Cumberland Farms gas station are off the table. The reason we are here tonight is because there was, my mother and I have known for quite a few years. Our map here was owned by Bill Stockwell from 1972 and prior, and we were approached by someone who was interested in opening a small CPA office and said, "Oh, I know your mother owns that land, can we buy it?" And I said, "Wish I could sell it to you. Not my land to sell, but furthermore, it's a residential house lot." "What the heck do you mean that's a residential house lot? That can't be a residential house lot." They didn't believe us. So we thought, maybe we have someone interested, and that's pretty much what we're here for. And I don't know if that answered anyone's questions or confused you more than I have been for the past 2 hours, so. And I should share our little maps here that you guys can
This is a
take
blow
one.
up of the map, I believe.
Yeah, and this just adds the .29 acres, under 1/3 of an acre, which is about right here, can be built on.
Just tap it up.
You're saying .29.
Right.
.29 acres, or 2.92,
Okay.
will only be allowed to be developed for business use because of the required setbacks of the residential abutting neighbors.
So this is the
So whenever you
ramp.
have a zoning district line, so right here, if the rezoning is approved, this would be residential, this would be business. The bylaws require 100-foot setback from that line to the primary, to the principal use. In the past, the board has determined the principal use to be the structure and all required parking, since you can't operate the use without the parking. So, so you would need to be 100 feet here. You are right, actually, before I was thinking this might only need to be a side setback, but since this will also be a zoning district line here, residential to business, you would also have to keep 100 feet here, and then the front setback from the roadway right-of-way line is 50 feet. In this case, there's also, because you're near a state highway, when you go on and off ramps on a state highway, there's an area that's called a no-access line. You cannot cross a no-access line with a driveway or access. In this case, that no-access line is here, so this whole piece of the frontage of this lot, you can't have a driveway on, so you could only have a driveway from here to here. And that would still require a Mass DOT permit.
Where's the no-access?
No access line.
Oh, there it is.
So we'd only be able to
Now,
access
just
through here.
for the record, anything dimensional in your zoning bylaw, so if it says 50-foot setback, 25-foot setback, anything with a number on it, height restricted to 35 feet, anything dimensional, an applicant can request a variance from the Zoning Board of Appeals to reduce that number. It's a public hearing process before the Zoning Board of Appeals, again, with notification to abutters and abutters to abutters within 300 feet of the property lines. And there are very strict standards within the law. You have to be able to request a reduction based on soil, shape of lot, or topography. Not, you can never use financial hardship, like, I can't develop it. It's a hardship. You have to be able to meet the standards of the law for that relief. So these, the ones Bill's laid in are the base bylaws. Those are the ones that the residents say are required right now. Those could be varied, but only through the public hearing process with the Zoning Board of Appeals and notification to abutters.
Can we even build anything on that small?
Chairman, Mr. Chairman?
That's all it is. Okay, so we're up to questions from the audience. Go ahead.
Charlotte Stem, 190 Central Turnpike. What was your suggested use for this property again?
We've been approached by a CPA firm who would like to put a small office space in.
Okay, but that isn't part of you aren't including that that's what you're gonna do with the property. So right now, you just wanna get the zoning changed.
We want to get this zoning
And then you
change.
could do whatever you want with it.
No, we can't do whatever we want.
You can do whatever's listed in the table of uses, which you've heard us talk about all night.
Right.
There is business highway, list of things that can be done,
Can be
special
done, yeah.
permits, permitted, et cetera, et cetera.
You can sell that property as residential though, right?
I
Yes,
believe so, yeah.
at this time.
So you don't need to change it in order to sell it.
Are you interested in buying?
I'm just.
I can't answer that question. We have not been approached as a for homeowner.
Hang on, we're not bidding here.
That could work.
Is there another question?
Nick?
Nick?
The descriptions that are in this group of papers, it's got a parcel 1 and a parcel 2. Parcel 1 has a lot 2 and a lot 1. A lot 1 is on the north side of Central Turnpike and should not be included in here.
So the issues with the legal description.
Correct.
Can you further explain it to us, Jen? Would you mind?
No, I have no idea. Maybe Nick can point and describe.
It says here, lot 1, a certain tract of parcel land containing 4,235 square feet more or less situated on the northerly side of Central Turnpike in the town of Sutton, which should not be included in this.
Right, so what
this
that,
group.
so maybe the original transfer to the Wentz family included several tracts, like many years ago, of which this was a portion. So,
We did lose land to eminent domain when they
Right, so-
extended the highway.
so whoever did the legal description needs to be extremely careful that all they're describing is what is shown on this map, that they're not including any area that might have been part of a larger parcel at one point in time.
Duly noted.
Another hand. Scott? Any other questions? Yeah.
Brandon O'Neill, I live at 160 Dodge Hill Road. I'm the son of Lynn O'Neill, one of the owners of this lot. And I see 146. We've all seen so much happen in a short amount of time on 146. We saw what it used to be. Our family goes back to 1790s. My grandmother used to talk about 146 being a dirt road, and we see all the pictures, which is I love. I still love having that rural aspect of it. But it's nice to have amenities, and we've seen Market 32 go in. Obviously, Sutton Square Plaza has done well over the years. We've seen 146 Fitness go in. I use during engineering for water testing. It's nice to have places close by without having to travel into the city, jump on the highways. It's good to have things close. And as we were talking about earlier tonight, the limited availability of retail stores and office space, it's very minimal. A lot of it's already taken up by light industrial, which doesn't serve a lot of the residents immediately. So by changing this from residential to commercial, it directly abuts the highway, right off of 146 South. I think it would better serve the citizens than a residential lot would. Not to mention, when you have these properties, it's a synergistic approach. So if you're going somewhere, you might change your route based on what's there, what it has to offer. I know if I have a chance to go down to West End Creamery at any given point in time, I'm going to take that route and get an ice cream on the way. This route, it goes along the way to Whittier's Farm, it goes to Waters Farm, it goes to the Manjog Lakes. I think it would add value to the town as a whole. Thank you.
In the back. Oh, yeah.
Jim Levins, 197 Central Turnpike. Just on that, just being in meetings tonight, talking about the business that you want to change in the center of town there, that how all the abutters and everybody get a notice and information on it. And, the petition that they have basically has a bunch of names of people a mile away from the it just seems like it was nobody needs to know about this quiet side deal. It would have just been a little more comforting for us to know if they came to us and said, hey, this is the plan. Do you have any problems with it, or goods or bads with it?
And that certainly is noted, but the strict terms of the law have been followed.
And my other point is, if you drive down Sutton, and it says it's limited to all these buildings, by the time you hit the Millbury line and drive to Sutton, there's about 3 businesses on the south side that are actually operating. Everything's vacant all the way down. It's empty buildings all the way down. They just clear cut and put a solar field in right next to a giant old abandoned drive-in that was a level spot that it could have went there. That whole side just seems like a dead area compared to the northbound side. So I just don't think that would really be helpful to add another spot to put a building up and maybe have somebody work there for 6 months, not be able to pay their rent, and just look at an empty building.
We don't control the market conditions, but one of the differences is that side of the highway has water and sewer. Up by the movie theater does not. There's the difference. That's what drives some of this stuff.
Right.
And until the town or the state decides to run water and sewer on 146, the developer may not choose to.
Get another hand down front. He was patient.
Go ahead.
Matthew Denitis at 11 Silver Ledge Drive, directly across from the proposed change. I had a few questions. Some were answered by Peter's comments, but one of the questions that basically Mr. Levin just asked about how far away, I had a question, who owned the property, and the petitioners assigned, put it on the ballot. Out of the 23 people, 10 of them are between 1 mile to 1.6 miles away, 7 anywhere between 2.2 to 2.7 miles, and then 6 anywhere from 3.7 to 4.8 miles away. Again, they would have no impact by the zoning change, and that's the point I'm trying to make, number one. Number two, he's already addressed the issue of limited usability of the parcel if it was changed to business. I had gone to DOT and did my own calculations, if I may. Sorry, I only have one copy. But basically, I'd come up with 0.21 acres of usable land. And the comment that Ms. Higgins made on the sideline from Mr. Levin's going over that way, instead of being a 20-foot sideline, she said something about it'd have to be a 100-foot sideline. So that would impact that even a lot greater. So it would probably be less than 0.21 of usable space. And the other question I had, which was almost answered, was I didn't see any plans of what type of business, but he said something about a CPA office. The other question that I have, going back to article number 2, in reference to medical marijuana, I just want to make sure I have it correct. Jen? Mm-hmm. On the medical marijuana, on the area that they can have it, it's not on Central Turnpike, does not abut Central Turnpike, is that correct?
If the article passes at town meeting that we're talking about, it would only be down in South Sutton Commerce Park for right now.
For now.
If you don't pass the article, then it can go anywhere where a similar use would otherwise be allowed, which would include the business district.
So my question is, potentially that could become a marijuana dispensary location, and if the law also goes further to other issues on the marijuana question, that would be.
I don't believe so. No water, no sewer.
Well, that's the other question.
Refresh my memory, 29 acres usable. It's 12,000 square feet. There's a house on Singletary that was built, it's about 10,000 square feet. So again, it's not a big amount of land. Again, I live a mile away. The question was asked, why were abutters not notified? For the record, they were the first 2 people that were notified that we were going forward with this was Jen Hager, and the abutter works at her office, who I'm very friendly with her and her husband, and we told them we're going forward with this. We do by no means want to cause any problems with any neighbors, but we truly feel, when the comment was made at least a dozen times, that there's little tax-based development land available in Sutton, and taxes are going through the roof, which we can all speak for. If it is sold, it will be sold as a residential house lot, which will bring 3 or 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 more kids into the school. And as I mentioned in financial meeting, I love children, I have 2, but they're the biggest tax burden onto the town. And here's an opportunity, one left of one parcel of land that could be extended to B2, and I don't believe it's gonna affect any of the abutters.
Just to make this clear, this is a zoning article which would allow anything in B2, as on this list, to be built. This is not an article to allow a CPA to build a building on this site.
Correct. So anything that would fit.
It's a zoning, and it has to fit. It's very limiting in the site plan review process. This parcel is almost undesirable. Okay, almost undesirable.
The further question, are you a beneficiary of this piece of property?
No, I am not. It's already been deeded to my sister and my cousin, so I have no financial benefit out of this at all.
Again, going back to the question of
On the record.
petitioners.
Doesn't matter.
Well, that's
Most
what I was gonna get
petitioners have an
to.
interest, that's.
The
why they
petitioners
bring
being
petitions
so
to
far
the-
away, it would have no impact, adverse impact on them, but it does have an adverse impact on us.
But again,
Oh, I understand.
the way things work, you can get petitioners from the opposite, it doesn't matter. It gets it on the article. That's what the petitioners are signing, to present it to town meeting and bring it to this forum.
The public hearing is for you get notified as a butter.
Not required by law,
Yeah.
but we do it as a courtesy.
May I submit the signatures of people who were proposed? Or is that required here or not?
No, well, you
You're
can
allowed
submit
to do
them, but
that.
it doesn't have any bearing.
I see.
So, it can have bearing if you decide it has bearing, but yeah, it's for the record.
I actually
So for
believe, I believe one of the abutters' properties actually zoned for B2, currently part of it. My understanding.
The zoning line was actually changed a while back, here, and then, no, nothing else that I know of is zoned.
But the Mrs. Stem's property, I believe.
Oh, a portion of Carla's?
portion.
Actually, yes. It looks like Mrs. Stems is at least partially in the business zone.
Get a hand again, Scott.
And I'd like to say that out of respect for my neighbors, I have absolutely no intent to anything but keep it residential, because we bought residential property. We want to live in a residential neighborhood. Central Turnpike used to be considered a historic route, and we would like to keep what we have had. You know, Jimmy, his house belonged to his family, belonged to his parents. I've been in my house for 30 years. I bought it because it was residential. The land across the street was residential. That's the way, and that, I think, impacts the value of the whole neighborhood. And we really don't want to see this change.
Is this a back and forth, if I may, or I don't want to overspeak my bounds, but for
Well,
the record, our family
we'll let it
does
go
own-
to a certain extent.
Okay,
This is.
we don't want to cause problems. We obviously, some agree, some don't. We own property on Central Turnpike. The family that owns this is a mile away, door to door. So medical marijuana, thank God it's not part of it, because I don't want it either. We just want to get that across, and according to Wikipedia, Central Turnpike is one of the oldest traveled roads for commerce in the United States. So it is a business travel road, as always has been, all the way into Connecticut. So a point of being in a country road, well, it was a country road for business. And again, part of your property is zoned for commercial. We don't want any problems, because I'm very friendly with the abutters here, but we think this is the best benefit for the town. And as I can stand up here and on record, I have no financial benefit out of this, which I should bill someone, because I can make a few bucks, but I get nothing out of it, so I can say that honestly.
One additional note, the land adjacent to this on the 146 southbound side is currently owned by Tony's, I don't know his last name, Tony's Pizza.
Across.
Across, it's directly adjacent, so essentially it's a very similar lot, but he owns a lot more land. And that was formerly single-family status and was changed to commercial some years ago. I think the neighbor said 16 years ago or so.
Not that one.
Not that long. So that will eventually work. It will be sold as commercial and developed.
At the business, at Business 2 district, that's right.
So we feel as though our parcel is quite similar to that in many respects, and that's why we ask to extend the zoning.
But in the terms of the process of how things work in this town, some of you may remember the power plant that was proposed for that very lot. That stirred up quite a bit of interest here among people. That was probably 25 years ago, maybe 30 years ago. It's quite a while ago. No power plant there today, obviously.
That's a good question.
Go ahead.
So, Jen, if they turn this into B1, B2, I mean, sorry, and now they cannot build a house on here any longer, and especially with this being a really small lot, it may not be attractive to many other businesses. Are they creating a hardship for themselves where now they've rendered it potentially?
I would say, I mean, legally, in terms of like zoning variances, those kind of things, no. Because variance applications, and you can't have use variances in the town of Sutton, they're illegal. So you could never say it's B2, but I can't use it for B2, I want a variance to use it as a residence. Those are not legal in the town of Sutton. Would they have an argument in front of the assessors? I wouldn't think the assessors would buy that because it was a voluntary change. So other than that, I don't, it's self-imposed, so.
You're proposing parcel 2 as well, isn't that?
No, just one.
Well, parcel 2.
What am I reading then? This.
The way zoning works, you have to pull from the existing zoning extensions.
Not a spot zoning.
Not a spot zoning that we talked about earlier. You pull from an existing line down through your parcel. So you have to include right-of-ways, roadways that complete the district and attach to the parcel. So it's just the way it's done. You can't use this right-of-way for business use. Not allowed.
Any other
But that's the way zoning
up here on
is
the board?
I'm sorry, Bob.
There's a hand in the back, but yes, I have one.
Yeah, go
Says
ahead.
Mary.
So this is Central Turnpike here, and this is the ramp coming off of it where it has the no access on it? All right.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the ramp's more like here, but the no access line starts a little while back
All right.
to make sure the state has direct control of what happens inside the no access line. But even if they applied for a driveway in here, it's so close to the no access line that not only would they need planning board approval for whatever is allowed here, but they would also need what's called an indirect access permit. It's generally not a yes/no. They generally will look at traffic flows and impacts and make sure there's nothing that screws up the works here. But it's generally an opportunity to get a nice filing fee
there you go.
for a permit.
Hand in the back.
That pretty much answered my question.
Answer.
All right. Nick, I guess if this moves forward, no matter what happens.
Whether you
The-
recommend it or you do
Okay.
not recommend it, it will go to the
All right.
town meeting floor. The petitioner can decide on the
Right.
town meeting floor not to make the motion, in which case the article would get passed over.
Okay,
But
all right.
whether you recommend it or not, or recommend it with changes, it goes to town meeting.
I'm nervous Nick's usually right. If there's something wrong with the plan, tonight, I don't want to vote to recommend this to move forward until you make very, very sure that whatever he's talking, the discrepancy, make sure that's right when you bring it to town floor. But when I hear that from him, he's very well versed, he knows that stuff. And I don't think it was at all intentional, and you paid for all this stuff, but everything's better be right when it goes on the town floor. So it's only for that reason that I recommend, I'd make a motion that we don't recommend this. And then when you get on the, I assume you'll move forward and go on the town floor, make sure you have that addressed.
Absolutely right, yeah.
So the residents can vote as they see
And
appropriate.
I do apologize for
Yeah.
that. That was
No, and that-
clearly an oversight.
Yeah,
You've made a
that's a
motion.
motion.
It's a motion not to recommend.
Not to
based on-
recommend.
Primarily on the discrepancies.
Yeah, just because of the discrepancy on the
Just
plan.
because Josh, we have a motion.
Wait a sec.
Yeah.
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay. Go ahead, Pat.
Just a point of clarification, assuming that you don't vote on this, we have a meeting tomorrow night with the Finance and Warrant Advisory, so I'm assuming that we would follow in suit and not give a recommendation and wait till the town? I mean, what are you suggesting?
Well, the motion on the floor is to not recommend the article. That is a recommendation. It's a negative recommendation right now based on the discrepancies with the legal description. So the board's current recommendation, if they pass this motion, is that town meeting not recommend, they recommend that town meeting not vote to approve this article, and the commentary is based on the legal description having issues with it.
Okay, I withdraw my question, I better understand, thank you.
The town meeting is scheduled for what date?
May 8th, 7 p.m.
Thank you.
So, as a comment to that, if in fact we agree unanimously to not recommend, so we'll be asked by the moderator, what did you do? We had a public hearing on April 7th, 10th, whatever today is, and we had a vote, 3-2, to not recommend that the town consider this. But the arguments and discussions from anybody on the floor can be made to support this one way or the other, and go forward and approve this or not. That's how it works.
And if the board does vote not to recommend, and town meeting votes the article down, so if less than 2/3 of the people sitting there and voting, so you can't fence it, it's those who actually voted. So if there's 60 people there and only 40 of them vote on this, it's 2/3 of that 40 people. So if town meeting votes this down, it can't come back for a minimum of 2 years unless it changes substantially. And the planning board's the ones that make it, the determination whether, in consult with council usually, whether a proposal has changed substantially.
I have a question. Lynn O'Neill, 145 Dodge Hill Road, and actually it's in the deed. The original deed, which is what I had for this land, so I guess I'm trying to understand the area you're stating is not part of the property.
In my opinion, it was erroneously put in there, and I don't think it's really a big deal. It's just that the town meeting have a correct one.
Well, only because I do have the original deed.
It's got nothing to do with the deed. You talked about having it, one of the notes at the end of the description says a plan. Are you having it surveyed?
Andrew surveyed this.
Yes,
Is
someone's
there
got to explain to do.
a current survey
It's
of the
not an
property?
official, so there was a meets and bounds done, and I now see what you're talking, 4,234 square feet. That actually says is now formerly owned by Cisco, which also owned Jim Levin's property too, so I don't know how this got on the paperwork. But as you can see, I'm not happy about it, because it's been 3 months of work.
Yeah, no, no.
And an
Consider
attorney,
it a big deal. It shouldn't be in the article, and when you present the article, just remove it.
It has to be correct on the floor.
Yes.
And that's my point.
But to your point and to my comment, I would vote to support this, and the description is a secondary issue. It's easy to correct. And I think that we do need to extend, I would like to extend B2 all the way down to the other road that's down at the, of course we can't. So I'm gonna vote to support this, moving forward, provided the description is correct. You show up with the wrong description, it's not gonna go very far.
be corrected by
I
the
can
end of
tell
the
you,
week.
I can tell you that. Is there any other comments?
I do.
Wayne?
When this gets to the floor,
Yes.
it will be written as is tonight. And you bring it to the floor and say, look, at the planning board meeting, at the finance and warrant advisory committee meeting, there was a discrepancy in meets and bounds. That has been corrected, okay? I'm gonna vote tonight not to support it because of the way it's written. If that's correct on the town meeting floor, I will support it. And I think that's the reason that I won't support it tonight, is because it appears incorrect, as Bob said.
Any other comments? We'll call for a vote.
Call for a vote.
All in favor?
I'm confused.
The motion is to
So-
not recommend,
So we're voting,
not to recommend that
no,
town
okay, I
meeting
just wanted to
approve it.
make that clear, okay.
And Bob added in because of the discrepancies in the legal description.
Thank you.
Okay,
Seconded by Wayne,
seconded by Wayne, so now we'll vote. All in favor?
of not recommending.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
So 3-2 to not recommend, is that what I just got?
Yes.
Right, that's correct.
You're not recommending?
I'm with him.
You're with him, okay.
We're voting nay.
Voting nay.
3-2-0, and the twos are Scott Paul and John Anderson, and then there's everybody else. All right, so the planning board is voting right now not to recommend based on the discrepancies with the legal description. It will be on you to make sure the legal description's right, and I would bet that anybody at town meeting, including the board members and myself, will want to have somebody who knows what they're looking at take a look at an amended description and meets and bounds map before it hits the town meeting floor.
And if it's corrected, we'll have the opportunity to say, we support it with the corrections.
No,
No?
not by this vote.
Individually.
Individually.
You can get up and say
At the
something.
town
Individually,
meeting,
not
I
as
can
a
vote
board as a
for it,
whole.
that's correct.
But when the moderator asks me the question, it's gonna be 3-2 against because. So if the because is addressed, it may, move things in another
That's
direction.
up to the discussion on the floor that night.
Okay?
Thank you very much. Have a
Right,
good
May 8th, 7 o'clock, town meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah, this way.
All right, we'll give it 2 minutes to clear, and then we've got solar photovoltaic.
I just wanted to get number 6.
Now, there's a new one of these somewhere. What do we do with this?
Just keep it off.
Here you go.
Add it to the file, so it ends up as an office.
That's
But it's gone.
interesting, yeah.
Well, I want to be in.
I don't have them out, you got them out on this
Court
one.
once. You know what I'm saying? I can't bring it up. I feel bad.
Bob, make sure you have the right one. It was like,
Oh,
everything was put down separately.
It's at the end.
Wasn't for you, Jen, it was for him.
Well, give it to me.
Thank you. It's good.
Mr. Lane, you can move it up to the front. Whoa.
They were laying in a pile, I thought, the revision or the more recent one of these for the solar plant.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't at the bottom of.
Just put it on our thing, it's right here.
There you go, you gotta read that next one.
Right there, amended. Okay. So this is the one I'm reading?
More,
Yeah, that's it.
stuff going back and forth. A long time.
Bob, you gonna read that last
I
one?
want to make sure I read it right. I don't want Nikki yelling at me. But so,
Number 6.
number 6 in revised.
Well, don't get there yet, just read number 6 and then we'll go.
Oh,
Thanks, Scott.
listening to the wrong guy.
Okay, everyone, pay attention. All right, 9:25, planning board time. Number 6, to create a solar photovoltaic
Yep.
overlay district to allow large ground-mounted solar installations in an area on the east of 146, south of Stone School and Smith Roads, and north of the Sutton North Bridge line by petition.
just background. Large ground-mounted solar is installations like you see on Oakhurst Road and installations like you see on Route 146 South, ground-mounted panels. And large ground-mounted means in excess of 250 kW, which is about an acre of panels under today's technology. So you can't prohibit solar installations, but you can regulate and determine where you like different size things. So in Sutton in the past, we said large ground mounted is kind of more of a commercial business use, so we'll allow it in B2, we'll allow it in I, we'll allow it in OLI. The petition is asking to allow it in, create an overlay district and allow it in this small area here, or isolated area here, not exactly small. So if you want to kind of explain where and why and particulars, and we'll go from there.
Sure, good evening to the board. My name is Zach Marcus. I'm with Borrego Solar. Here with me is Attorney Lane and the Dan Nacker family, who is the landowners of this parcel. Borrego is a large-scale solar developer. We work across the country. We do a lot of work in Massachusetts. This particular warrant article has come before you guys specifically for the reasons Jen has mentioned. We have a parcel of land that is at the southern area of this overlay, and we are pursuing a solar project in that area. To avoid any spot zoning, we live in an area south of the Sutton transfer station and east of the highway. And you can see some of the other landmarks on the handout that I brought. There's a satellite image, there's a large image that's shown up here, and there's a couple areas, West End Creamery, you can see at the south, Pleasant Valley Country Club, you can see at the northwest, and some other areas that you guys could orient yourself. On the back side is simply a black and white version of it that prints out a little bit better, but I thought for the conversation to be easiest to talk about the satellite image. This area is just north of the West End Firewood operations owned and operated by the Dan Nacker family. We saw this as a very good area for solar. Essentially, it's in the middle of the woods. It's not close to any residences where they'd be impacted visually. They would not be able to see or hear the project we're proposing. There's obviously a highway right in the area. There's a gas pipeline that runs right through this overlay district. There's also a utility easement, electrical easement that runs through this area. So while it is zoned rural residential, much of the existing characteristics are in what we would consider a good area to develop solar. We've been approached by National Grid, the utility, to develop and construct a 1 megawatt solar project for them at this location. The overlay is approximately 180 acres, and we are looking at a 5 to 7 acre project within that 180 acre area. I don't want to talk too much about the project itself because we're focused on the overlay, but I can certainly answer any questions that you guys may have specific to the project or to the overlay.
So, you guys have some revised language. Mr. Lane had a really short time frame to come up with the petition language, so there were some issues with the petition language in terms of the section that it was proposed in, the description of the property, just some general issues. So what you have in your hands is a proposed revision to the petition language within the scope of the original article. So says pretty much the same thing that the petition does. It just puts the regulation in the right section of the bylaw and gives you a more accurate description of the area. So again, you can't change the language of the petition article like now, but it's my understanding from my conversations with Zach and Mr. Lane that this is what they would intend and would like you to consider in your recommendation tonight, that they would be willing to put forward as an amended motion on the town meeting floor to be more consistent with the existing bylaws and a more correct description of the area.
That's right. Thank you, Jennifer.
Through the chair. Did I hear correctly that the area outlined in blue on this drawing is approximately 180 acres,
That's correct, yes, sir.
and you're going to utilize 5 to 7 of that.
That's correct.
Okay.
This one, the blue one, on this thing, you can see the different property owners, or the different parcels.
So that's approximately the area that we're targeting for the solar project.
Okay.
And that's 1 megawatt?
It's 1 megawatt.
It's 5 or 6 acres.
Yeah, Jen's numbers were accurate. You can see by the awkward kind of shape of that parcel. This one is a little less space efficient as some other projects, which is why we're closer to the 7 than the 6 that is normally for a 1 megawatt project.
Okay.
In the back.
Hi, Kathy Egan, 36 Smith Road. I can't tell from that map. Can you tell me where this is in relation to Smith Road? I saw it's in south of Smith Road, but...
So Smith Road crosses the highway. So Smith Road is on southbound right here, and it's also northbound and attaches up to Stone School.
Hi, Dave Gopford. I live at 17 Winchell Drive. I got to apologize. Your letter came in, I think, over the weekend. We were away, so I opened it literally about an hour before this meeting.
Right.
So not prepared, but very shocked to see this map outlined with my house inside the area that's in blue. So obviously, that's why I'm here. My question is, if they're only going to develop down there, why do you need that whole strip, including my house and half my property, to be rezoned?
Where's your house?
17 Winchell Drive.
So this is Winchell right here, so which one's you?
I can show you.
Okay.
Well, that map's better, I think, 'cause this doesn't show the
Are
close.
you, you're on the
Oh,
end of
there we
the
go.
cul-de-sac on one side or the other?
Right, yeah, here we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, actually, from the aerial, that's my house right there.
Yes, there's a number of parcels there.
Yes. Well, the person that lives down here, he was never notified either. He was totally surprised.
Again, as I noted earlier, there is no requirement in the law for notification on zoning changes, overlay districts, nothing for people in the district, for people abutting the district, but we send out a courtesy notice. It wasn't until I was here wicked late on Friday afternoon that I said, oh, I forgot to ask my assistant if we sent out notices to the people in here as a courtesy. So I said, you know what, before I leave here, I'm just gonna shoot out some letters just in case, because I didn't know whether she sent them out again as a courtesy or not. So I wanted to make sure we made an attempt at least to notify.
All right, so I got another question for you then. Why do you have 750 feet off of the Smith Road, but not the same consideration for Winchell Drive?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, board members. As Jen indicated, we unfortunately had very little time, merely a matter of hours, to generate this bylaw because there was some I guess we just had information on the deadline for the warrant, so we sort of got caught up short. So we put something there this together very quickly without really having a chance to analyze exactly what was going to be included in the district and what wasn't. So having that in mind, and also having in mind, of course, that we try to avoid spot zoning to the extent we can, we sort of created a much larger district than we actually need. And we have absolutely no problem with reducing the size of the overlay district dramatically and removing any property that people are uncomfortable with. We just wanted to avoid spot zoning, and we wanted to make sure that we encompassed enough land to make this a viable project. So from the very quick analysis, it looked like this area is largely isolated, doesn't really have access, probably will never be developed for any purpose, and therefore it just seemed to make sense. But if the gentleman is uncomfortable with that, there's absolutely no problem with eliminating his property or the town-owned property or anything else. We are only interested in the south end of this. The rest is simply there for, as I say, purposes of avoiding spot zoning issue. But we're very flexible.
Didn't we have a conversation earlier? The village overlay is an
Almost,
overlay
yeah.
and does not get challenged by spot zoning?
Never seen one on an overlay district. And
Right.
haven't seen a standard zoning on, like, spot challenge for a good 15 years.
Okay.
Rarely challenged. I mean, obviously, when you limit it to one landowner, there's almost always a cautionary in the letter from the AG, but no denial by the AG on an overlay that I've seen in forever.
Is there property ownership currently on this map that you guys have control of?
Yeah, we own we own this piece here.
That piece there?
That bottom.
Okay, this right here is what you want?
That's what we own.
Okay. And
So-
there's nothing on these lots, or
No.
is there some, this?
No, those are vacant.
These are vacant.
So we have no problem when I cut the zone in half and eliminate the rest of that. It's fine with us. You know, as they say, it's purely technical for our point of view.
Sure.
If the board's more comfortable with that, if the gentleman is more comfortable with that, we're happy to eliminate.
Okay.
Well,
Wait.
Okay.
I'm gonna look here to John.
I'm very concerned about this proposal because a few years ago we had, it was a farm in kind of West Sutton part of town where they had they had a situation where there was a lot of backland and you wouldn't even see the solar panels and the very low impact. And it was turned down because it's in a rural residential area. And the bylaw was written very specifically to, you know, reasonably regulate and put the solar where we, like in business and industrial areas. And we turned down that family who probably could have very much used the funding coming from a project like that. And this feels a lot like you're just trying to avoid spot zoning by just including this big swath in a rural residential area. And I feel much more comfortable that if you approached and changed this to a business or industrial type area, and with the rigors that go along with that, to be consistent with the bylaws as it's written today, rather than just doing an overlay, because what's to stop anybody within any part of the rural residential part of the town to say, oh, I want to do an overlay district in order to suit my needs of putting a solar. The town has spoken, has been very, through town meeting to make sure that we have reasonably regulated this into appropriate areas for what we feel is an industrial sized project. And, the thing was, makes this a little bit more complicated, you are right on 146, but it is, so it has a potential to serve the needs of the town by becoming a business district if the residents so choose to do that. So as of this point, I would be very reluctant to support this because I feel like it's setting a precedent that could be copied throughout town. And I'd much rather see, if you're going to pursue this, that you pursue it trying to change the zoning of that area to meet the bylaw where it exists today and not do this overlay to kind of circumvent that process, is how I feel about it.
I don't disagree with that. It's just that, from our perspective, I guess, an overlay district limited to this use is much less intrusive and presents much less of a risk to neighbors than a general zoning change. If you open that to general business uses, you could get almost anything. And as a practical matter, there's no good access to this site. It just doesn't lend itself to any kind of commercial use except a very passive one. I'm sure you're familiar, solar projects have very little traffic. I mean, they come once or twice a week, I guess, to monitor them, do some repairs maybe, but there's no public traffic going in and out. And this is a very isolated site. It doesn't really have access for any real business use. You couldn't put an office building here or an industry that generates traffic. This is just, it's vacant land for a reason. There's a gas pipeline running through it. There's no real access to it. It's almost ideal. It's not visible from the highway. It's just an ideal spot for solar uses, which is why National Grid wants it as solar. It presents no negative impacts to anybody really, and uses a piece of land that's not really suitable for any other use. So this seems like the way to do it with the least amount of impact.
This is behind the the National Grid warehouse facility, right? That's where
That's
this.
lower down.
That's lower down, and
That's the
that's
next
That's the
change.
next.
next
Bump out.
exit, okay.
If you're out
If
west
you're
Van
familiar with the
Buren,
cell tower,
Yeah, that's what's here, yeah.
and
if
you
you're out
probably
west
have,
Van
but there's a
Buren,
cell tower
across the
on the
street,
site.
there's a wall ledge.
Right.
It's just on the north side of the line, but it's,
And then this is beyond that.
From there, all right.
How would this site be accessed for,
Through an access easement from Northbridge up through the existing West End firewood operation.
the access would be right across from West End Creamery. There's a driveway going in there.
yeah, okay.
Vehicular and electric. It would tie into the utility lines running east-west on Purgatory Road. So National Grid selected the site because of some grid variants that they're trying to work on. So the project would include upgrading the three-phase on that road as well.
Go ahead. Pat?
Hi, Pat Morris, Johnson Road in Sutton here. Can I direct a question to them,
Sure.
please?
Yep.
So if I understand from your map here, you'll be, as I'm looking at your map here, this being my right hand, you'll be to the right of the pipeline?
That's correct.
Okay. So will this solar farm, if constructed, be visible from 146? I'm sorry.
No, sorry. No, it
Okay,
will
so
not.
all the trees that are along there now, you're not
Not
gonna
touch.
clear cut them? I mean, I can't stop that, that's what you're gonna do anyway.
We're not going to touch anything on or west of the pipeline.
Okay, my only comment is, and this is, because I live over there too, is that this is far too much, and after listening to Jim earlier here,
That's the
if you can do an
pipeline.
overlay to do this, then I would recommend an overlay that just covers what it is that they want to do, because this would create, I believe, a tremendous hardship by changing the zoning for all the people who live along there. And I know that the suggestion was made when Mr. Lane and the others were at the Finance and Warrant meeting we had last week, that this would benefit the town because this zoning would go all the way up so that we could put solar panels at the transfer station. But I think we're a long ways from that, and there's a lot of things that would happen in between here. And again, I think it creates a hardship. And if you're going to do it, it needs to be tucked away in a corner. Thank you.
And we have, as I say, we have no problem doing that. This was a very quick hit to try to get it on the warrant, and, if that's the preference, I'm
So-
happy to amend the proposed change.
So let me ask this question, since this has been advertised and went to Warren and Finance Advisory, now we're looking at it, if it's let's say it's 80% reduced,
Not a problem.
not a problem.
Can't grow it.
Can't grow it.
Right, you can't
reduce
grow it substantially. You can grow it, but you can't grow it substantially, but you can reduce it.
Okay.
That's why we always hope to shoot for the mark, so, we're constraints are
So-
what they are.
So Pat, what were the results of your meeting?
The result of our meeting is we delayed voting on everything until tomorrow night because we didn't have any recommendations from this board on the 6 items you're talking about now. So we're voting tomorrow night, so we want you
Put
guys
us
to
in the hot seat.
stay up and we want your recommendations.
Scheduling.
No
Someone
pressure.
else scheduling.
Are you taking copious notes?
I have.
I'll be doing this
And
all
Jim
again
will-
tomorrow
and,
night.
I will be Jen's able-bodied assistant.
Yay, thank you.
Nick, go ahead.
How much of this is gonna be in Northbridge? How many acres in Northbridge?
0.
Nothing?
Just the access utility, just the power lines.
So this is just totally in Sutton?
That's right. Panels will be totally in Sutton, that's correct.
Okay. As it's shown on here, a substantial amount of this property is actually owned by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and
Yeah.
perhaps one other owner, other than the Vandenackers. If they reduce their proposal, this overlay, to just the Vandenacker property, I would think that that would be much more acceptable.
And that
Is this
would,
also Vandenacker here? This is, right? Vandenacker family here?
That's
So you'd have-
it's not certain who, of uncertain ownership.
I think on our maps, this is also family, but not
Assessors have been known to make an occasional error. Nick hasn't made many in life, but
We do make mistakes. That's the first I've heard of that.
Scott?
Go ahead.
Cell towers and solar panels are something we're becoming experts on, and I want to make sure that I'm hearing you clearly. That National Grid is on board with this. This project. We had north of Boston Road on both sides of 146 solar panel projects come before us, get approved, and then at the center store, at the dump, I meet people who say, what happened? No trees coming down. And it's like, so I come back a year later and say to Jim, what happened? They said, well, it got approved, but National Grid has spent all the money they're going to spend on solar panels, so no trees are coming down, and it's, so when I just want to make sure that I'm hearing clearly that National Grid is on board. It happened with a cell tower that they got put on up in West Sutton, and the phones aren't working. Well, the cell tower people didn't say they had to get 2 more people to sign up before they could put the whole thing online. It's like, so all those meetings, and there was really, it wasn't going to actually happen. So for the Vandermark, I want to make real sure that as you go through all this stuff, that there really are going to be solar panels there, and National Grid isn't going to call up and say, we're going to push, we're not going to do it right now. We've spent all our money on solar panels that we've outsourced. So it's absolutely, National Grid came to you and they want to put up solar panels, and this is a project that's going to happen and not get pushed back for a couple of years.
Yeah, as a point of clarification, all projects that are obviously done in your town are National Grid territory. They are a part of every project from an interconnection standpoint to look at the feasibility and safety from an electrical standpoint.
Mhm.
In this case, they are playing that role, but they are also going to be the project owner and operator. National Grid put out what they're calling their Phase 3, so it's their 3rd phase of National Grid owned and operated facilities, and they
Not Phase 3 electricity, just Phase 3.
Phase
Okay.
1 was a couple years ago,
Yeah.
Phase 2.
Okay,
now-
good. No, that's-
And so they awarded and named this project specifically as to be included in their Phase 3 portfolio. That triggered us to
Okay.
move things forward with the Vandernackers, and we're standing here now.
Okay.
You know, as I look at this overlay, and an overlay can be selected by geographic area where it would be suitable. We allowed these panels by right, permitted use on B2, when I looked at the project that just happened northbound or southbound, and wonder if that's the best use of the land, quite frankly. And would rather see that here in an invisible place, high use, good energy, good sunshine, but in a place that's not as obvious to the flow, and our corridor of business highway use is now populated by solar panels, and I don't know that that's the best use.
I agree. I think it's a tough dichotomy that we see in a lot of different towns. When solar is regarded as an industrial use, often towns don't want them in industrial areas because there are higher, better uses from a tax standpoint, many other reasons. But then you can see the argument as the people of Sutton have looked at this, saying we don't want it in our backyards and that type of thing. So I think it's probably the result of some poor development, but you're correct in saying this project is very well cited. Utility easement, gas line easement, out of sight, out of mind from anyone. So as Mr. Lane, or Attorney Lane has referenced, we're happy to modify this overlay, so it's not.
Can I just make sure I understand, this little rectangle is owner unknown? This is the one that,
The town of Sutton says that Vandernacker owns it.
okay, so this would be the Vandernack, we'll call it the Vandernacker.
We're still looking for the deed, but the town says we
Okay,
own it.
so this is the parcel that we're really talking about.
So we're talking about the large one, but I
Yep.
guess the consideration would be to move the zoning district over the triangle, over the 2 parcels here.
This triangle.
Yeah, our project.
This triangle and that
Our
triangle.
project is being considered right in here.
I need to know what you just drew. Like this?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
So-
but
Or
see
triangle
how
all
the
the way
blue line
across.
stops?
Yeah.
That triangle goes over to the road right
Over
by
the
that
town
cul-de-sac? Yes. Well, not, yes, the town line.
So then don't you have residents on the end of that cul-de-sac?
You do.
Right.
Yeah, so I would think you'd want to keep that buffer in there.
So where I said I'd like the overlay
Like, you
idea.
wouldn't do this, you wouldn't add this in.
Well, and that's My residence is right here, that's my property.
Same proposal that they.
But your house isn't right here, right?
No.
But his property
No,
is,
but it is my property.
Uh-huh.
and he doesn't want panels on his property,
Or-
sounds like to me.
Right,
Or
so, well,
limit his property to solar
When he
panels.
finds out National Grid's gonna pay, he may want the panels on his property.
well, but you're saying his wouldn't be in the district now.
No,
His would be
yeah.
adjacent to, and then he'd have the buffers that are required by the bylaw.
And so where I said earlier, I think the overlay is a good idea. The problem with me right now, faced with this issue, is I would like more time before we talk about an overlay district. That's kind of my problem. Is this our normal, this is not our normal zoning
No, we
meeting.
usu-
This is the budget meeting.
Yeah, we usually do zoning only
In
in
the
the
fall.
fall. We needed to move, obviously, marijuana as fast as we could, and then the board
Okay.
promised we would bring village to the next
That's fine, and that's,
available
and
town
that's,
meeting.
that's fine.
And petitions have to go whenever they're presented.
Unfortunately, our constraint is that our commitment to National Grid also has time constraints. which
Okay.
Precluded, because we had looked at which is why we kind of rushed this, because we had thought October would work, but from National Grid's point of view, October does not work, which is why we, sort of came in a somewhat rushed fashion, but.
Can I speak again?
Go ahead.
So I think there's, as I mentioned, there's a couple things that are concerning me here. One, I do think it's a good site as far as it's out of the way, and it's not, so I agree with that. But I think, as I stated earlier, I am very concerned that we're doing an overlay in a rural residential district to meet the needs of one person in order to, kind of circumvent the bylaws that exist today. And we've had other cases in town where people have done the same thing in rural residential areas and were turned down their amendments to the bylaw because the residents spoke that they did not want these in rural residential areas. I think this is a victim of, yes, this is, probably a good area for it, as was theirs. It was in the back 40 of their farm. So I think there's that one issue. So it's setting precedent that I'm really worried about. And then I've got the second point. I think you mentioned it, but I'm just going to let it go. But I think that's my biggest concern right now is that this is rural residential. This is what it's zoned. It's an industrial project. And the other piece is that this was hastily put together, and I think we need more time to think about this being an overlay district and what the ramifications of that are. But I think those are the two things that I'm worried about with this. One is the hastiness of this, and the fact that, just like the last bylaw, it wasn't quite, not everything was all in a good place. And to be honest with you, when you start making amendments on the floor of the town meeting, it can get really confusing and oftentimes add to the complexity of it. So that's my concerns with it. So I will definitely not be supporting this.
Can I just ask one last question? What would be the benefit to the town?
Money,
How much?
much.
Well, the assets are taxed. So right now, it's
It's a tax-based
rocks and
issue.
trees.
It's usually a
In the
payment
future,
in
it'll
lieu
be-
of tax agreement, a pilot.
Okay.
So
So
if they don't execute a pilot, they have to pay personal property tax on every single one of those panels. And the battery storage, which is a unique aspect of what I think you're proposing here. So it's usually payment in lieu of taxes. They
You recall-
negotiate something with the administrator's office and the board of
I
selectmen.
recall what the tax was on the.
No clue.
What's that?
No clue.
I don't
And
remember
Nick
either.
Newmacher has ran from the
The
room probably
building.
because he anticipated that question coming.
It's not $1,000.
Oh, no.
It's
It's
not
usually
$100,000,
No, it's
More like
usually
tens of thousands, yeah.
but it's just tens of thousands of dollars.
40,000.
Yeah,
You know,
that's
it's-
a good
a lot of
question.
money.
I know I did.
It's more than
a
a standard industrial or retail by,
Half
significantly.
half a police cruiser.
No, I mean,
Or a whole police cruiser.
so the reason my question is, I want to see the town continue to grow as well. But I also have to look at and protect my own interests, what kind of impact does that have on my property value by having a solar farm in my backyard? So, that's why I asked the legitimate question. I mean, how much is the town going to gain? How much do I potentially stand to lose?
And those questions and those answers, from what I've heard Nick try to explain stuff like that, and it's not a simple answer.
I know.
Because the valuation of the town and Prop 2.5 and, all this
Yeah.
stuff they go through, gyrations.
But what we do know is that solar farms require almost zero in public
Services.
expense. The police don't go there, the fire department doesn't go there, they
Right.
don't generate any school children, very low impact, all you get is money, you know, so there's no question that these things are a benefit to the town, plus it generates renewable, clean energy, which is what everybody wants. So this town, like every town, should be doing everything it possibly can to encourage the
We're a
development
green
of
community.
clean energy.
Don't want to burn coal, you know that.
Some opportunity for a coal-fired power plant a few years ago, and they
West
turned it
Virginia
down.
bus.
I withdraw my sarcasm.
But if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to spend some time tomorrow morning to reduce the zone to that line that's been highlighted on that plan, if that's more acceptable to the board.
That line.
That line. So
But not
basically
out to
limits
the
it-
town line.
Yeah, just limits it to basically abandoned acre property, you know. If the planning board's comfortable with that, if the town planner's comfortable with that, I'm happy to do that.
I have no opinion.
She cannot have an opinion.
Why do we pay her if she
She
has
can't,
no
no,
opinion?
to be an advisor, to be a very educated advisor.
But I
Advisor.
have a strong opinion.
I'll tell you whether it looks legal from my perspective once I see it, and Nick will tell you whether it looks legal from a legal description, but that's why they get paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're worth every penny, sure.
Any other comments? Are there any other comments from the?
Last question, sorry, I promise.
Don't-
That's what you said last
Keep
time.
asking.
No, just
Please, keep
so long as
asking
it's something new,
questions.
that's, we like to keep, you
Yeah,
know,
so
new information.
if you do want to do this as a, what do you call it?
Overlay.
Overlay,
Mhm.
just as you did with the
Village Center?
Village Center, you would create a committee that would
No.
work through everything? No?
No, there's already an extensive regulation that regulates large ground-mounted solar systems. There's already a bylaw in place, it's about 7 or 8 pages long,
Okay.
that basically
I
regulates
can't support
setbacks from property lines, screening, things they have to provide, the public hearing process, how that all happens. There's already a regulation in place, so what would happen is, they're just adding area, they're adding this area where you can additionally do that. Anything they try to do there has to be done in concert with the existing large ground-mounted solar bylaw. So, public hearing process, special permit.
All right.
Actually, no, permitted as of right with full site plan review and meeting all the requirements.
So it comes back here for site plan review, so you
Right,
get.
notifications to abutters within 300, not abutters to abutters within 300.
Can you, how do I get access to that bylaw?
I
Or-
can give you a copy of it on the
Can
way
you?
out the door or email it to you.
That'd be awesome.
And it's online.
I know, I could Google it, but I could probably forget what you just said.
I'm happy to get you a copy.
Yeah, it's in here, it's page 120 in here, it's one of the longer
Actually,
bylaws we
since that's
have.
the old bylaw and that reg hasn't changed, we can just give him that bylaw.
It's only $29.95.
If I can find it online, I will. Let me just,
No, no, no,
we're
just
just
take that
joking.
one
It's
because we have to
$35 for
reprint you one.
residents.
And that bylaw.
Yeah, it's more for residents.
So it's right here.
Trying to make some money here.
Large scale solar photovoltaic. So page 120 is where it starts.
I'm ready, Scott.
So this is where it starts.
I'm gonna do the same thing
And
I did
it's
on
this,
number 5
and it keeps
let the
going,
vote go where it wants to go.
and keeps going.
Okay, just so you know.
And keeps going to here.
Okay.
So those are all the requirements, and that applies, and everything in this section applies too. So everything under site plan review, because they'll be required to submit everything required here and everything required here.
Okay.
Okay? And if anything conflicts, the large ground-mounted solar bylaw prevails. There you go.
No other questions in the audience?
Any wetlands?
What's that?
Any wetlands?
We've walked the site and had a wetlands biologist review, and there's no work within 100 feet of any identified wetlands.
Okay, you won't have to come to see us then.
What is it, Conservation
That's
Commission member
conservation.
Joyce
Yeah.
Smith speaking from the back of the room.
Some business there?
No, I'm also in a
So at 10 o'clock on Monday night, thank you for coming at 7. And I want to do the same, make the same proposal with the understanding that this is going to move forward to the town meeting anyways, that I'll make a motion that we don't approve this
Do not recommend.
as it was presented to us tonight, knowing full well that you're going to work hard tomorrow to reduce it, and it'll be presented on the
Not
town.
recommend because the area is too large.
Right, it's going to be presented on the town floor differently and much smaller.
Yes, sir.
I'll second it.
Second. So, as a discussion item, I think that's the space we're talking about.
This one.
Well, I'm not sure where the other line is, so I'm drawing it
Well,
on here.
it's 1,200 feet parallel. So, are you drawing it on a property line?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay. Whatever.
Is that?
I'm drawing it on that property line like that. The Vandenacres property
No, I
line.
don't.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so that's, in my consideration, more palatable.
Okay.
So this has been motion, second, any other discussion?
So discussion was just main project Vandenacker parcel.
And you're probably not a
Is your
resident of the
discussion.
town of Sutton, so you have a
Here's our
spokesperson.
petitioner.
There you go.
Okay,
Good.
there's your petitioner.
And you're clear on what we're doing? Yeah, okay, yeah, so I want to make sure that the residents know, because we have to face each other.
Okay, so the motion's been made that we do not recommend this article as written because the amount of land covered in the overlay is too large. So all in favor of that? Aye. Opposed? Abstain.
Okey dokey. Unless you have something else to chit chat about?
We gotta sign
Motion to
papers.
adjourn.
We gotta sign papers.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
No, close public
Close,
hearing.
close public hearing.
Oh,
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Thank you. All in favor?
Thank you.
Sorry.
All in favor of closing the public hearing?
We did.
That's a five?
Yeah.
Okay, you're signing papers, you don't need to do that unless it's an open meeting, so.
Motion to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Why are you right there?
That was a Wayne motion, who was the